단 구츠는 리얼에 간대다.
염정 쌤게 던규래 탄다.
아, 송샤나. 수근 구츠에는 게 랭고래.
어, 긴게
어,
송이.
산.
In the
너송. 산제 주.
yeah, sure, that's okay. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Sangha, I take refuge until enlightenment. By the merit of practicing paramitas, may I attain Buddhahood for the benefit of all sentient beings. Chanchupado Dani Kyapsochi. Take Chinzaki Betsonaki Tola Benja Sangha Trubasho. Choda Zoge Janamla Chanchupado Dani Kyapsochi. Take Chindaki Sonaki Tola Benja Sangha Trubasho.
나마라 얘기나 노단 얘기 중고다나 미게나. 로군제 자나 지장바 단제기 두다기 주든도. 음. 아, 난공자 없이 통보면 되나? 공부돼. 세부 통보돼.
Rinpoche says it seems so. It's quite dark that people can't see him.
아, 이나노니. 다시 제시. 음. 네. 재밌어. 음. 음. 따따리. 단 상니니. 따 춘지 제스라고 그래. 다야 취시 시시네 난중 말한 속이 에 다 춘지 제당지어라. 베나다 베선지라 왕고야 순다. 아니 지나 제순다. 안디 마임바 지 라인기 흉다고 도스마 티에 줘라. 근데지 에 제외이나 그 제기 랑가지도 요러. 다 이내디 랑도 수순의 차니. 나도 참말로 초 디자인게 매딩이 수르시. 근데 차이기 네가 도트니. 근데 춘지 다 추기 토니만 드시자야. 디 조수는지 멤버제. 다 나랑기 뒤준도 상로 가르당겨요 봐. 강연 TV 가도로 상로 간데 당겨요 봐. 뒤준도 상로 간데 당겨요 봐. 디마 시샤나다 수수기 용어차디 거라. 다 수수기 용어 인상 디 편도 치료 연구면 로상상. 디 진수. 그래서 디인디 강라 다른 게 도스마 쉬에디 비제지 시샤시시네 기 쉬에메. 디 마시고 진수. 음 다나신 가생에만 가수 팀마 당부 니버지 친사버다 다리디 팀마 숨어 숨지리 가생에만 가수 쉬심버 디주제디 다 도시 공자야다 아니 지 우르 미니 공자야다 딘데 도시 쉬버어 디주제디야 핀도 데 수수수 제외이나 디 핀도지 연구도 상것도디 그래서 다 디기 추스는디 다 다리야 나수 카도다 울미니 공제의 딘데다 조시에디 많이 버지 아까서 디쉐미 다 다리 뒤준도 상동당 간데 지에 있는 수수도 빈도 치유 연구에서 디슈나 진수당이
So Rinpoche says that today he will teach about, he will give teachings for 2 days. These 2 days, today and tomorrow. Rinpoche will not talk about, like usually when you give a teaching, so when you explain the Dharma, basically, Usually you have topics such as an empowerment or a practice permission like a Jenang, or you teach the Lamrim. But the problem is that usually it becomes like some kind of automatic process. It's just something you do, it's customary. You give these teachings and then people listen to it, but it doesn't really trigger a special feeling in people's mind. It doesn't really do anything to them. Therefore, Rinpoche feels it's important to talk about the Dharma in a slightly different way, to talk about the fact, talk about how we think on a daily basis. So what is our attitude? What is the attitude we should have when we have problems? What is the attitude we should adopt in the different situations in our life? So previously, in his previous talks or previous teachings, Rinpoche gave teachings that were similar in that sense, not like traditional teachings, but more direct kind of practical teachings that are connected to our experience. And Rinpoche wants to continue doing that. In the past, Rinpoche spoke, for instance, about the meditation on the breath, mindfulness of breathing, gave a lot of explanations on how to meditate. And so explaining about the different methods and so forth. Now Rinpoche feels there's enough of that. He's completed that explanation, but he will continue from there. That is, talk about the different types of minds we should adopt, how we should think, what kind of attitude we should try to develop. And so that really goes back to our own experience. This is something practical on the basis of our everyday life.
用呼吸作为所缘来举例，去谈说要怎么做。那么如果我想大家如果有做的话了哈，我相信一定呢是对大家有一些帮助的。不过在今天的课程当中，今明2天的课程当中，我没有打算就是再一次去进行这个观呼吸啊等等的练习，而我想把整个重点着重在跟大家介绍平常的思维的思维内容。我想呢这样子做也许会对大家比较有帮助。
在卡森年嘛，但你们尼嘛西面的讲了，说吧去最松，广大去最松，但你们尼了昨天细节呢，去最松松节去最处处，在今天了是给什么的，讲的昨天细给些什么的，昨天细给些穷人上，俺俩商量难过了，写的昨天细了写明朝日记。水果了上当果了，上了忙不休的那当的给马中，因为上去马当是当了，他的今年昨天当不的了呢，的结果成不但我说，律动些，听我说，加给拿过了放下些对吧？律动些的，的给起不起空的对吧？去死了为呢，还是停在起，因色来成呢，但看这是律动结果的是，提过了季节，短时当不的，那短时你个的，今年主数就趋势，今年不的主数就说，今年不的，我说了今年是来车有了的，今年看就车嘛，真的还过嘛的，但还啷个车不你不算得起。가도 체마 전이 봐요. 마. 체 용디 가는 가서 참아 심부추 마지바 차 강에 시부 용디도. 그래서 근데 인디가나 진이 투수 줄당디 간제 스트레스 제시네 전생지 디시 오tem을 초된 니버들. 초된 숨버들라 아주 상류 나로라 녀모버 지당디. 다 녀모스 치디다 베제 땅들에 마땅들에 간데 가서 루칸시 나랑 주주를 지용디 간라 아주 심바 마롱와 센투데야 딘데지 수용구도 딘데기 루 디나니 조조디 벤 차당기 루다고 디나니 되샤디 다 간데스 지용고 레스 지시니 딘데기 되샤 지당기 지당스러워이너레다 对下基本处的，看这是对下基因我的是的机器。今天人们喜欢的了， 주단 제비기 낭샤 세티 로 주단 제비기 주당디 지시 고증을 때 전세 시수를 지수요 다 초된 시를 전세 시수월이 다고랑 구디징이 다 디제나 갈레카사레스 슈게 주제 송곤다 주제 송진의 갈레카사레티 이가라 니만니 마시메바체 초된 니 마시메바체 초된 리를 주제 송수니 아니 단 zenre timani ma du meba tende chi yin sa di je du nge tun sin shi sue di nga la ta le la do war ni ma chi le ka le ni ja gu ma ra ka le chi ma shi ja gu ma re nge di tun sin shi di chu di ni nang lo le ka zu tu du xie tue tue gi be zhen chi ro zu di tuen da ning bu di gu da chun ni ji chung ba yin na de ge re sang sang tende chi chen de ye da
Now, Rinpoche was under the impression that we're going to have 4 sessions, actually. So it's only 2 days. Rinpoche will give teachings for 2 days. And the original plan was apparently to have 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the evening, and then the same the next day, which would mean 6 hours on each day, altogether making it 4 sessions, 4 teaching sessions. So Rinpoche said he thought it'd be good for every session to talk about a different subject, a different topic, address a different point. And Rinpoche said he thought about the different topics he could talk about and came to the decision that he liked to teach in the first session, he would like to teach about an important concept, which is the concept of letting go. So that is really important to reflect on, to understand. Well, first of all, understand and then reflect on what does it mean to let go. So for instance, when when adverse conditions arise, when adverse circumstances, when we have obstacles, we face problems, how can we transform, how can we let go and transform these problems into something positive, into something that benefits us? Now, we all have obstacles, we all have problems. Problems arise all the time. So these are described as adverse conditions. Now, what can we do when they arise? How can we deal with them? How can we transform them into our practice, transform them into something positive, into something that benefits us? That is the topic Rinpoche planned to talk about at the first session. And then for the second session, sorry. No, the first session was, I got confused. The first session was about letting go. The second session was about how to deal with problems, how to deal with difficulties, and how to transform adverse conditions into the path, into something beneficial. That was for the second session. Then for the third session, Rinpoche planned to speak about afflictions. So what are afflictions? What are their causes? How do they arise? What is their nature once they have arisen? The fact that afflictions disturb our mind, they distract us, they do something with our mind, which is not helpful. And in that way, when attachment, for instance, when aversion arises, and in particular of these two, when there is attachment, when attachment becomes active in our mind, well, how does it actually arise? How does it come to be? And what is it exactly? So that's what Rinpoche planned to talk about during the third session. Then as to the fourth session, Rinpoche thought to speak about, we'll give a presentation on cause and effect. But anyway, there's a lot, these are a lot of topics, and actually Rinpoche found out last night that the organizers told Rinpoche that this will be too much, it will be too long. People will get tired if they have 6 hours in the morning, 6 hours in the evening. And so they shortened it. Now we're only going to have 2 days of teachings, and that is 2 hours for each session, which means Rinpoche says, well, this is easier for him. So it's actually less to think about. It's easier in terms of what Rinpoche needs to speak about, but he would still like to talk about these different topics, try to fit all of these topics into those 4 hours we have together.
간대성 구축이나 다 강学的ngarangi nangjun sina khode tinde de redi inaya keji shedi gangla dile kurinda uchi sugudo kurinda chi suna madu yungumi to shezange di da dos dos chi jaye changsange da jaye di dese chi jin da go dagi dagi chene kurin yobachi da da jabala tine ngale kurin yoba da ngale du jun sambale seo 넘버 2 구야라 핀도 치워든데 용스特别是 용구로 세상第一章예 지진의 다제 투제들 도수 다기 양 어디 투제들 양생스 다기도 디 가르사 코랑기 난진 상대 디 인사마스 디 친구 말이 디 구림 미투비 치도 양 가시까지 투제와 있는 차상 시토의 연구도 차상 난주 팀의 차상 시토의 연구도 투제를 마대는 망치시 버루버루도 양欠对的用的도
So Rinpoche said, well, how should I start? So actually Rinpoche says, what I'm going to talk about is not difficult to understand, but it's important to follow a certain sequence, which is what Rinpoche prepared. Like the different topics he prepared, he arranged them in a particular sequence. And so Rinpoche said he'll have to look at his notes in between. So every now and then he has to take a look in that way just to make sure he follows the sequence that he's actually prepared. And in that way, it'll be clear. It'll be clearer for Rinpoche himself as he speaks, and it will also be clearer for you as the audience. So Rinpoche says, don't think that what I'm saying is not coming from me. Everything I'm going to talk about, I'm not using someone else's teachings, but instead these are my own thoughts. These are my own ideas that I basically jotted down. I basically wrote down. And some people actually when they take notes, well, they take extensive notes, but because they took notes, they don't have to look at their notes any longer because they basically remember everything. And then there's some who well, if they've taken notes, they do have to look every now and then, but they still remember. So this is a helpful way to prepare.
디슈니아사레 다 지당니리다 다 지당니 가서 상당디강라 심벌은 주어 컨테스틱도 따디강라 다 니버지 니소너리다 된디 인벌라 베 타지도 따디다 운에 인사레 다 운에 레샤 상베 틴제기 니버지 니소나 아니 녜마기 상동단디라 조티토도 조티토도 벨 차츠면바이나 다 베스는 가르지안 이야기에나 다 베스는디다 가서 그래 취랑기다 낭된레 근데 지는 배신 되게 상도 근데 제왕하시다 보시라 다 제왕하시라 나를 자원에 도나메 돼봐 제왕하시라 양면은 이체메 봐 양면은 도나 자원에 메 돼봐 딘데기 미지기 뒤중기 죄랑당 상동나 주요로 다 구제왕하시라 루가쇼야 루쇼바스네 요레 상바 딘데 자원에 메 디강라 친딜러지 디봉 기도제 데오 디버봉야 다 교도야라 디 초스케 레고에 민도 하나 먹고에 숨시린도 다레디 니마지 오다 쩌응하시세디 오네 회사에 상비 지 쩌응하시라 니버니버슬라네 딜럽에 타지디 이제 손데 레버이나 로 하버도 제버제니다 디다 니버 가르니버다 야는 딜러지 타지디 이체 버순데 좀바이나 다 딘제기 니버니버도 이체 디기 강사 디기 뒤준도 상로 동단다 쥐버기단 참은 주어 디도 다오 밀뇌제나 디버사그레 두자 자오 두자 지그레 자오 두자 차그레 자오 두자 디기 제오시면 네버 용그레스 제지니 딘데기 자주 참은 주어 디기 상로 동단 나로라야 오다 야부제는 또 자원이 디기 말했으니 상동나 배든 주어 용도 그래서 디 조태디 상로는 조태디 생긴 나로라 네버지 니지니 이제지 니지니 조태고도
Now, in general, well, when we think about it, how does our mind change? Like, what causes our mind to change? Well, it's important, first of all, to gain some kind of conviction in order to bring about mental change. So, for instance, or to get a sense that my thoughts can change, my attitude can change. So, to take an example, for instance, here Rinpoche is kind of was wondering aloud. So, which example is best? Well, he said, well, the best example would be an example of the Dharma, an example that relates to the Dharma. So, let's take past and future lives. Imagine there's a person who has no interest. Think of a person who's no interest in past and future lives, doesn't believe in past and future lives, in fact. So usually their behavior may reflect that disbelief in reincarnation, in the sense that, well, their conduct, their usual way of dealing with other people, well, it's all based on not believing that it's important to accumulate virtue and to avoid non-virtue. There's a sense that there's no need. That person may feel, well, there's no need to accumulate positive actions, for instance. But then let's say one day, for whatever reason, they do generate faith. They do develop faith in reincarnation. Not just that, they actually gain conviction. They become convinced that there's past and future lives. So that will change all their actions. It will change the way they think. It will change the way they behave, the way they treat others, and so forth. So in the sense that now they become aware of their actions or aware of the possible consequences of their actions, and make more of an effort to accumulate virtue and not to accumulate negative actions. Therefore, that kind of belief that was generated, that they generated in their mind, that conviction in reincarnation can have a very profound effect on not just on their thoughts, on their mind, but also on the way in which they behave, the way they conduct themselves, the way they conduct. Yeah.
가서 양답이 이체 넘버 답아 진니발라 디잉외도 니바 지 다 세면 담비 니바슬라고 이너레 니바 양답아 진니고래 니바 양답아 진니발라 니바 양답아 진니버 쇼시 메랑제다 야나 니바 양답아 진니에디 상제기 낭로 시시 만나야 스케미도 수수 생기 낭로는 니바 니에디 다 니바 니발라 녀라 제바치고래 수수 제바치고 수수 제바치네 다 인다미 테다미테 가르제 마레 세지 미신다기 지레 슬라디 오임바레 마레 슬라디 오 멤버레 세티 제바이나 다 디차바라 가서 그래 휴주스라고 그래 베기나 간들 세진장와 이 미신다기 가르라바이나 디지선장 되지 창로로 제상 디인디강라 레슬니지 레바이나 가르치네리 말했으니 레바이나 가르치네 말이 간데 스트레스 레스지네 간다 제바디야 제바 용수 줘야지 로 제바 넘버 답하지 근데 치고도 다 제바라 제바 체다 된거지 제윤디강라 누수네베 돈이 제바 치고르마도 당분에 수수긴 되버지 키치시네로 수수는 되버지 땅아주 사만은 되버지 용구로 수수는 되베 쇼지 용구래 니 쇼라 가신 치워 파기 쇼라 가신 총마세 딘데기 되베 쇼지 용구로 세상 수수기 산례 나로라 되버디 여버디 조 제시네 아니 되베 쇼디 두토야긴 비전선이 되베 쇼디 디기 저주니에 선지 다 딜러지 반다니에 선지 반다 망 가서다 망 나래 망와 딘데지 라야기 치에도 제바 제디 유에 있는 참아 쇼스는 자고 디 핑요 말. 다 슈리징기 상무 차디고. 다 제바 제베 카도 딜라 다 무에네 줄라 간제지나 무에네 줄라 간이버디 통버 치고래 띵이버 치고래 무에네 줄라 가리나 가리인고래 주생 가레시지 무에네 줄랑 추액이 공론지기 토네 아니 제바 제네 무에네 줄 가리나 인시버래 가이나 인시버리 수수기 뇌바 나신지야 용시버리 뇌바당 미튼바 민뇌바지야 용시버리 뭐에네 줄라 그래서 가리 용나야 용 가리 용바 이네 뭐에네 줄라 에 수수기 원리 문진지기 상부딘데기베 상부지기 토네 제바제고에 다 가두이네 개치물인도와 그래서 상제 중딩대기 딘데기 제바제당디 개치물 슈지기도와 베나 루수니아바 수네 루딘 되니로 시즈네 취르 투상 진이디라 루수니아바 디베 마자고레스 디메바이나 취취 라 투상 제약이 다 소마기 신이디 창금 아래 송도와
Now, in order to generate the right kind of belief, a correct kind of belief, correct in the sense of being in accordance with reality, it is important to generate certainty first, to generate a kind of conviction, a kind of certainty as to whatever we believe in. And that in turn requires analysis. So it's not possible that this correct belief, this certainty will be implanted on us by the Buddha, been implanted in us by the Buddha, but it's something we can only attain if we engage in analysis. Here it's important that we adopt a kind of impartial, honest mind that doesn't just follow the words of other people. So if someone says, yes, it's like this, then we're right away convinced that it is this way. And if someone says, no, it's not like that, that we follow that view. We shouldn't adopt that kind of attitude because that's not stable. That doesn't really help us to reach certainty to such a degree that we can follow the right kind of belief. Therefore, it's very important to first analyze the situation again and again. So whatever is the concept that we seek to follow, we seek to generate a correct belief of, it's so important to first analyze well with this kind of impartial, kind of open mind, without allowing at the same time for our personal beliefs to interfere or to influence this process of analysis. Because then it's less likely that we come to the right kind of conclusion if we already have certain preconceptions, we believe something to be a certain way, and without being able to go beyond these beliefs, without allowing ourselves to be too much influenced by it, we won't be able to come to some kind of new understanding. We won't be able to follow a new kind of belief. Here, what's most important is that we analyze what is reality. How do things really exist? That is the kind of motivation that should drive us in our effort to analyze a particular situation. So really the wish to understand how things really exist. And in that context, anything is possible. I mean, it's possible that whatever conclusion we come to aligns with our previous beliefs, or it does not align with our previous beliefs. I mean, anything is possible. We can come to all sorts of conclusions. But it's important that we have the right kind of attitude, the right kind of impartial kind of mind. So as the Tibetan proverb goes, with an impartial mind, you will accomplish everything. Therefore, it's so important to have that right kind of honest, impartial attitude that enables you then that enables you then to understand a situation in the right way. And it's also said that without this impartiality, without that openness, without that honesty, you don't, if you're lacking that, then you're lacking the main characteristics, the main kind of mental attributes that you need to develop in order to be able to study and reflect in the right way. So in terms of the practice of study and reflection on the Dharma, it's extremely important to adopt that kind of attitude, that kind of mental quality of as mentioned earlier, this kind of honesty, that kind of impartiality.
그래서 디인디가라 ngwe karin ba di tola da kasu kore ne tuyes la gore be ngwe ne tsu di tsuyin samba chi ngwe ne tsu tsukin chi ngwe la shinju jikin chi jikin samba chi ma do rang dang rang gi shoka gi da rang ni dang yang min rang ni ji shu su du mi ji gi da de ba du ya di di zu ji yin sang bi sang di ma yin ba o di da ge ji mu ji cha de di jie wa ka du jie ne ge ji mu du di lu din de ji ne tu di gang la di din de gi be su ne be lu di la zi ji xiu ji du di la ji ga su zi ji si la gu de da di la gang de di du rin탕 침부 쉬우지도 다디 수수기 세나 딘데지 코용디가라 난중이 상당당다 민다오스 지차 용구도 디제디 어디 김 메시지도 상사 수수래 처래지 딘데 제디 랑상랑상 제퇴지레미도 또 용다지니 딘데 용어지 지구도 딘데 지레샤 다 딘데지 다 상루기 시절로 유바시 다 디토네 다리 전전 당부딩에 律动我写的，律动阶段的，属于写的，开始了的。但我说那就去忙不，写过的，去忙不，学过的，学过的，다去写的全大我们的，开始，다 나신，去的规定，开始写的，我说上抵挡过了，但去的规定的，长途呀，다 나신，추기 구된 구바디 창토 장마서 추세 추시비 된다 가리인버디 문제 토네 다된 문제 토네 추기 된 뭐마디 다 수수기 제토에다 디 구바 창원지 제토는 다 추스 탄이 단을 마단을 체백게미도
所以呢，事实是什么？我就安住在，我就可以待在这个事实上面。
So the point is to understand what is reality, to find out how things actually exist, whether what we're analyzing is in accordance with reality or not. So what is it that is truly there and what is not? So to actually understand how things actually exist. So this is not about coming to some kind of conclusion that aligns with the wishes we have or that aligns with what other people close to us wish for. It's not about that. It's not about accomplishing what we wish for, but it's rather understanding reality, understanding things for what they are. So this is quite amazing, having that attitude to not be guided by what we wish or what other people wish, but being guided by our motivation to understand reality. It's amazing and it's invaluable. It's quite unusual as well. It's not an attitude people usually adopt. And we should develop the thought that this is actually quite special and be aware that this will not come immediately. that kind of attitude, that we're interested in reality versus what we or other people wish for. Anyway, the main topic Rinpoche wants to start with is with the topic of letting go. Now, there are a lot of teachings on the Dharma. There are a lot of people, we teach the Dharma a lot. We listen to the Dharma a lot. So in that way, the question that arises is, what is the Dharma? What is that Dharma that we teach? What is the purpose of the Dharma? It's really important to think about this, to understand what is the Dharma and what is its purpose. On top of that, what is the actual meaning, the meaning of the Dharma? So not just what is the Dharma, what is the purpose, but what is also its meaning? And so based on that, we should then think, can I practice the Dharma? Is the Dharma really beneficial? Once we, okay, I'll continue later.
동해 또 동야당 아니 디와 망도 투야 랑긴 되베 디와디 두베 체도 취지거래 취세디 동해 시야당 디오 두야기 타랑 다 딘데지 인구지로 딘데지 인구지거래 디마이는 취제비 구가 참고마 취세디 그 다스 자기를 디자는 마세다 취세디 벽에 나로라 다 주바스는 주주 당마도 고고도 심바 주주 조어 당마도 고고도 주바도 심바 주바도 고고도 취바도 주바 된다 지버리 다 심바 주세 대양 주고에 가르치 슬로디간라 오 주고에디 심바 마 주바지 당에 뇌면이 상당당데 랑자 대바이나 맞아도 강에 치르다 세상 뒤주고다 뒤주나 강에 용도를 강에 시도를 아니 되베 되어디 고네 뭔다 비트웨지 로 되베 되어디 루트에 용거래시 디송고도 세상 대윤디간라 니 상문낭도 다디 니기 상수시 거다 취기 된다 뭐마디 류동了 고인은 되게 두스 가르슬러디 류동나 디와 뭐마디 용토도 류당 마토바당 녀만나시지 대시시네 로 류동야디 마제베이나 류동 상루디 매베이나 동에 ngani 용디베 동에기 다 준디 마체베 토네 아니 동에베 조주 메디베치로 베 가서 그래 동에 나주 못이네 최대의 연구도 세상 취기 된다디 주베 된다 양세 류동베 된다디라 구구도 디 구구도
对不起，我把放下这个词改译为舍弃，可不可以？
So Rinpoche said previous. Oh,
可以
question.
吧？你的中文比我好，你来决定吧。
啊
平常我
好
听到的就是放下，
，OK，
嗯
好，那好，好，那我们来看看，我们到底
So Rinpoche previously said, well, if we understand that, and we understand the meaning, the purpose, and all that of the Dharma, and we are able to put it into practice, well, then whether we call it Dharma or not. So if we can really put it into practice and it becomes beneficial for us, it doesn't matter what we call it, Dharma or not. Then Rinpoche continued saying, well, one of the main purposes of the Dharma is, of course, to remove problems, to remove suffering, and in its place, to find happiness, to find satisfaction. So here, the purpose being to remove suffering and to find happiness. Well, without that, then its purpose not being fulfilled. It's therefore important to understand that Dharma, the meaning of Dharma in Tibetan, like it's a chö in Tibetan, it actually means to transform. So in order to make our Dharma practice, to fulfill the purpose of our Dharma practice, to remove suffering and to find happiness, it's important to change our mind, to let go of our old thoughts, basically. So if you still hold on to our old thoughts, our previous thoughts, our previous attitude, then it's very difficult to bring about a change. Instead, and Rinpoche says, this is my opinion, the Dharma really, what is the Dharma? The Dharma is about letting go. If you want to summarize, if you want to sum up what the Dharma means, well, it means to let go. Without letting go, so remaining the same as before, if we have the same attitude, the same thoughts as that we usually have, well, we'll continue to experience the same kind of problems without any end. So they continue endlessly. All the problems we've experienced until now, we will continue to experience. Therefore, it's so important to let go of our past attitude. In short, when we say Dharma, what is Dharma? The Dharma is to transform our mind, is to change our mind, and Dharma means to let go. So in that way, it can be summarized into those two, which are not contradictory. So changing the mind and letting go.
다 제디 간수律动过的事情呢律动于确实了为那的律动是的是一个次第短大的起码几些忙过帮阳明的卡说的第一短大的这些新大级的交集是呢你第一章的女把名说的是律动结果的是老地方了国十五没得吧但几档的这些说的是说顶这几了固定啊马赛的律动结果的是呢但的区别的这些些的但的这些些地方了这些地卡说的女把名是了我呗但수수기 게 제투매잔 디시에버레스 해수는 딘데지를 봐 공동해 수르시 딘데기 된다 지를 봐 고리에 딘데지 용되기도 세상디 가르치는 딘데 용버레스 마수 상당부이나 류동세기 치디 된다 나다지 망고 인상 디 강에 대체버레스 것도
So when we say letting go, we have to let go. It's important to understand the manner by way we have to let go. I mean, what does it really mean? What is the meaning of letting go? We don't always understand what letting go refers to. And if we misunderstand this process of letting go, if we don't really understand how to do it, then it doesn't become beneficial. Also, there are quite a few wrong views or misunderstandings when it comes to who should, for instance, let go. So a lot of people believe a religious person has to let go. And they believe that, well, like someone who practices religion, they have to let go because they don't really have the ability to do something else. So that's why they become religious practitioners and they have nothing better to do than to let go. But actually, that's a misunderstanding. And so in order to be able to let go, it's important that we understand it correctly, understand what it actually refers to, and not have these wrong kinds of views, which of course result in our effort of letting go not being effective.
在第一地方呢律动写的的加拿大的加拿大不就是恰全的人米的看得进来出了第越南这个马来斯越没容易上会律当过的是卡些国定的了连着呀律动过的是了地方了加拿大叔叔的越呢是吧가수 수술을 뒤 잘라디 루 미쳐봐 당 잘라디 수술을 유 미쳐봐 수술을 유버 뒤 밀을 파 제고 유봐 양나 파 요고 유是不是说파 잘라디 파 요니 미신다了怕这把当今天现在嘛都叔叔给打不见呢这个呢吧今天给转达了不对呀上律东当机了律动谁的叔叔了约不的别节动就没说的的别节当呢아니 다律动谁的转达的唱给没吧约那样别节当初嘛的是别节嘛当了아니律动谁的转达唱过的别节嘛当呢他刚刚听嘛的谁说的等这个国际了你看国际类的说的是但律动谁的等这些话看到律动是的叔叔的约没出说的是加拿的库朗约不的卷音吧加拿库朗卷音吧说的是加拿库朗也被恰谈见你卷死了我的他看的约没容被加拿新不当加拿库朗卷进给让新不印上你约出嘛的现上律动前呢等这结果的上说的是国等这些类的约为说的等这些但常常啊说等这扩的多
Now, when it comes to letting go, let's take the example of letting go a thing, letting go something, kind of letting go of some material object, for instance. So we may think it's just not okay to have this thing. So whatever the purpose for having that particular object, but there's the thought, oh, maybe it's not okay to have that, so I'll just let it go. So that would be one reason. Or it could be that we think keeping it is not okay. So just keeping it is not all right. So better to give it to someone else. Or the thought we're not allowed to use it. We're not allowed to use it. If we use it, we get problems, which again leads to the thought, well, maybe it's better to give it to others. The point is basically there's a sense I'm not allowed to have this. I'm not allowed to keep this. I'm not allowed to use this. That there's maybe the sense that the object itself is faulty, could create problems, etc., or I'm just not allowed to keep it, etc. So this is kind of an attitude that may arise. So sometimes we may think letting go really means that.
다 문에 지나 상제 중인데 지 류동굴의 송야기 된다디 된대잖니 말했어. 디짠이 송고요 맞다. 류동굴에서 디 가서 벽에 나올로 치니 용구도 류동세지. 다디 동굴에 쓴거부터 동굴에 사마 동굴에 사마 제굴에서 시디레면도 제굴의 동굴에서 류동세 치용구도. 류동스의 디가라 다 루이토네 상루 동당기 토네 고 동야지 제국을 스타디 동당디 난중기 동당 자라미 라발레 제 디기 동당디다 민다오지 임버디 고 타니 고랑 토네 고는 렌트웨지 용구요 다 디인디간로 류동세기 된다 모멘트 가스요스나 다 자라디라 가소래 다 세불은 자라디라 미비 신차디 되샤디 다 내가 수고레세 된다 두두디리 야면은 자라디라 상로 동당디 자라디라 미비 상로 동당디 조지 당고레스 자라디라 따당스라 고레 딜라 따추 자라디라 따추 자라디라 따추스라 디간라 다 가르고 위에나 간들 자라디 유베이나야 딜라 따추 체다 덴바지 마존나 디그 말에 따추 체된지 고그래세 배지 어디 디네라고 쓴 거다
然而
Now, in reality, that's not what the Buddha talked about. The Buddha didn't talk about this kind of this way of feeling I'm not allowed to, I cannot keep this, it may harm me, etc. It's not about that. It's actually the Tibetan word is le dongwa. Le means by the mind, and dongwa means to give up. So it's not about just giving away or giving up. It's about mentally doing so. So the mind, it's through the mind that something is given up. So the mind gives up. It's not about just physically giving it away. Therefore, letting go may refer, for instance, to give up our desire, to give up our attachment towards the object. So to mentally give up our attachment, our clinging to this particular object, or to change our attitude towards the object. So mentally, we give up our desire, our clinging to the object, or we give up our attitude. So in the sense that it's to have a particular object is only permissible, it's only helpful if we have the correct attitude towards it. If we don't have the correct attitude towards the object, then that's not okay.
大样的差不多。
Oops. I think there's a power cut.
停电了。
We have a
那通对。
we have a
통기민도.
thunderstorm going on in Dharamsala right now.
거기도 통기민도.
So the Chinese translator also just said, we can hear you, but we can't see you. So Rinpoche's brother said the light just went off. So I have a backup battery, which is why I still have light and Wi-Fi, but Rinpoche doesn't have a, maybe doesn't have a backup.
律动马结尾呢，捐卡里요래律动结尾呢，捐卡里요래定远的训呢，就是比赛的什么的。但律动马结尾呢，律动谁的，律动马突尾呢，马做的他刚年级切尾个了因的嘞，对军的因的嘞，刚年组局没有记当，他不的今年没去切尾卡多了，马最新把哈江里边，马结尾切当。 新哈江的处理呀的，他那些律动设计，在全大我们的上届的送一个律动物的是新家律动新家去内容的是新家的嘛都是大嘛作为呢，卡里用的是地方呢，今年不是特别卡多这个，的呢，叔叔生脑路了，就要长了拉，那今年卡里贴个了，说了，那这度假是定这用原有的，那大那些学呢，叔叔的那米几个吃穿为那那米了，刚年菜的给我定这吃有了，就是定这个今年定的地大个，忙都越为地方的定这个刚年就特别卡多地了。 但是要长么拉呀，当身边的出息，别身个那路多年修就错呢，早的最浪头钱些，那多年一年呢，6年给5年，早年浪头也没有些，钱呀第一，律动是个全大的，国内的基本性技术水平，往年大头呢，没有印章，第一图呢的用的有个送给我的是啥？ 잘 먹고 있었어.
던지죠. بشير.
那么
Now, when it comes to letting go, it's also important to reflect on the advantage of letting go and the disadvantage of not doing so, the fault of not letting go. In particular, in the context of problems and difficulties, if, for instance, we experience some hindrances, some adverse circumstances, some problems arise, well, it's possible that they make us very unhappy. So it's in this context that the Buddha talked about the need to let go, especially when we have difficulties, when we have problems. Otherwise, it may cause us to lose hope. It may cause us to be so unhappy, so to become so desperate that we lose all hope. For instance, if we get sick, or if our family or a family member experiences great problems, this may actually, unless we learn how to let go, we may cause us to lose hope, to have a sense, I have these great problems. It may be as bad that we have a sense, I can no longer bear this, I can no longer carry this problem, I can no longer get up. So this is because of not being able to let go in those situations, which is why the Buddha talked about the importance of letting go in the context of, for instance, experiencing certain problems, certain adverse circumstances.
那时候我们会感觉到我们的整个人好像完全的没有希望，我们的心呢整个混乱，那么我们的那个苦领受到的这种苦的感觉也很强烈，那种感觉就好像是我们被苦压着，完全抬不了头。那么为什么我们在遇到那些违缘的时候，我们会如此的感觉到希望破灭，内心错乱，苦很大，压着我完全抬不了头呢？其实都是因为在那个状态中，我们没有办法做到放下，所以才会让我们有这样的遭遇。
律动呀的，与的人那边新加的，律当嘛作为呢，新罗马基本上，新这用呀当，刚年的，就进来了，就是我来呀当，就是这的，各种旅游的事情呢，那就我们的去过了，那的因为大生的了。那陆地用细细的，其实的特性节很多。
Now they're talking about the electricity.
The video的估计像一些的，等的是，等的是，现在加拿大了那边新加的怕绿大马多的干嘛多为呢？说今天一生个囊落了，刚刚拿出用个月的，定啊出细骨头，说，别加下为呢，加拿大了米呢，加拿大切度生产节当，第切度是多把节当，第切度最把节当，今天节的卡顿股足度，俺说第细骨头，的确卡顿子呢，叔叔的生囊落了的。用呀，跟古的卡对足都是，老的讲了，加拿大了米为新加的卡对列为那里，新加的列为呢送的，但今天用呀的古作用过来是，
Therefore, when it comes to letting go, well, if we have a particular object, like a material object, for instance, so when we cling to this object, then lots of problems arise. As long as so the moment we have clinging, the moment we have attachment, we will face lots of problems and difficulties. There's no end to the problems and difficulties we experience, and it will cause us to lose hope in certain cases. If we cannot let go of our attachment, if we cannot let go of our clinging, there'll be problems. There'll definitely be difficulties. So that's what we need to understand. For instance, if we're worried about something and we can't let go of our attachment towards this particular object, then we start to fight about it. We start to worry about it. We start to obsess about it. We start to fight over it. So where does that start? Where do these problems start? Like worrying about the thing, fighting over it, obsessing over it. Where does the beginning of that? Well, the beginning is attachment. It all starts with our attachment towards this particular thing, this object.
他那些米地了，米现在几度假了为呢？第一切都家人家呀，最把家的卡顿古足都是了的讲了， 미디를 미베 신자 유번에 송디 우주용구도 说 당부 미디 자오니 무식 메버시 디네 더루지니 미디 무식버차 이내 딜을 미베 신자들의 게 메버이나 다 미디를 미신다지 가르러버 이내 가서 생나로라 알레 딘데 임버레스 야미나 딘데 런던 리유에지 마레세 딘데 이상도 용스기 레디 이내야 디게레기미도 가슬로 그래 미신다지 쿨러 두자 러버디 구용디간라 kuikola duja dinde susu la shega yung digan la simba ma jiwa chaya dan long lanya dan dila pa lin lo gu sang sang dan zueba jia gu sang sang gi dinde gi chowa di sang lu di shu chimbu ki legi mi duwa da nima ji mushibe mi di dan yang yang dan di ji jine dila xincha ji leba ina ruwa 新加的来差别急了，你没现在这卷这个来为呢，你新呢，上南路了嘛基本上，在第一点的控制啥样的技术真股作用过的。
Let's take the example of worrying about another person, in particular when someone else insults this person. So if we have attachment towards that person, if we cling to that person, if we have attachment, then that may cause us to fight with the person who insults this other person we're attached to. So it's important to understand that the reason we get upset in the face of someone insulting this person we're attached to, well, it all comes down to this attachment, to this attitude we had. But we were not always attached to them. I mean, first we didn't even know them. And then we got to know them, but I had no attachment yet. And when we didn't have attachment yet, when we knew them, but we didn't have attachment yet, at that time when we witnessed that another person, for instance, insulted them, well, we may have had the thought, oh, that's not okay. They shouldn't be talking to someone like that. But it wouldn't really lead us to worry about it, to become unhappy. On the other hand, the moment attachment arises, if this person we're attached to faces some problem, faces insults, we feel unhappy, we get angry, we may want to retaliate, we may want to fight with the person who insults this person we feel close to. The point is, therefore, the moment there is attachment, the moment there is clinging to someone, there's attachment to someone, then any harm that that person experiences will lead us to feel unhappy, to get angry, and so forth. That's when it all starts.
가서 그래. 킨사 쓰려고 그래, 기무셔에 쓰려고 그래. 되게 다 망보 용 그랬던 것도. 다 진이지 쉬에 있는 세부 차야기체도. 배는 가서 구슈 가봐. 구슈 가봐디 이러 구슈 가봐디 다 야슈디 딜을 찾으면 이나 다 총간 나로로 구슈 가봐. 다 망보 열어 야슈디. 다 망보 샤샤요. 다 딘데 망부 수 유에버 총간 나로로 망부 유에버 디 수수기 무이제네 뉴만사베 공나 총간 나로기 구시카와디 차바이나 로 미지기 디 상인다고 제니 짜바이나 아주 디장 디게레임도 디게레임도 시부지 자린 자고상 그 두자레 상바지데 레시 난 항상 두자레 상바게마 말레버지 디무단 데베스는시도 안에 kuzu dinde chigido si chishin dimudan debi sunu chigido da gesi jala darang rida dagi di mishinda di jaya ki kushu kaba gongchimbu di jibajijang da jucha dang chichong da gong changma jibajijang di susu ngui zheni nyu cabe jilo susu laba leba ina susu laba leba di jaba ina di da nga su longlang do da longlang zuba jaya di jiwaro 다 잘라를 채버 지에며 그래. 채버 가르침 버렸으나 채버디 지디 수수 응의제니 수수기다 나게를 송사리다. 딩딩이 ngui chaba indi nge se gi sang di yor da ro ta nge se gi sang di yebe tone susu gi yimba di la xinjia yor nga susu gi yimba chama la ama xinjia yebe sun chi rang gi yimba da rang gi yimba zang de ma se be rang gi yinju gi jala di la yi du wang tone ya wo xiu ji le tong ji xin ne di la xin ji cha be lu yue ba ro din de ji chang so na da din de gi 랑기 인삼비 루여바 마세 랑기 인삼비 루여바 장데 마세베 랑기 인삼비 상루유 상루로 레디세기 유디라 신자 유디바 딘데지 창소나 다 딘데기 잘라디 미기 투갈레스나 롱시빌랑도와 다 디체도 뉴저 창문 내용 다 딜레딘
Now, with regard to this situation that Rinpoche just described, so actually there are many examples for that. Some of them are actually quite funny if you think about it. The example Rinpoche gave, for instance, I think Rinpoche used the Chinese word for phone, and he spoke about a phone cover. Now, let's say there's this beautiful, you go to a shop and there's this really expensive, really beautiful mobile cover. So while you're in the shop and while you're looking at it, someone comes in and starts to break it. So in that moment, well, it's not our cover. It's just lying there and someone is breaking it. So we may have the thought, oh, that is really bad. Or we may enjoy the spectacle, just watching how someone else destroys an expensive object. However, if after that situation we decide to buy the same cover, so one cover was destroyed, was broken, but we buy exactly the same, we pay for it and we go home with it, then the thought arises, this is mine, and if someone tries to break it, we get angry. And there's the thought, oh, it belongs to me, I paid for it. And on top of that, there's attachment for the object. So it's those two, the thought, this is mine, I paid for it, as well as the attachment to the object. The thought, oh, this is so beautiful. And as a result of that, we generate that clinging, that mental clinging, that kind of attachment towards the object. So if you have those two, the thought it's mine and the resulting or the accompanying attachment to the object, then we get angry when someone tries to break it, when someone comes along to destroy it.
다 단다 전신이 슈디강의 디슈이바 랑기 임바 당스 로 랑기 임바 장 딩아수 자신의 자유 말에 랑기 인 상바 디 가서 자신 조지르다 지만에 가서 세나로 마치고 용하기 주진들 랑기 인 상바여봐 랑기 인 상바 랑기 원zembe 다 다기 원zembe 루스그리라 다기 원zembe 루 루여베 토네 다기 원딜라 신자여봐 다 디니 창소나 다 생기 나로라 센테다 마치바다 라수바 두냐 나수 용하기 ngu디니 조용구도 다야 게시리다 랑기 임바 있네야 랑기 인상베 루메바 있나 다 잘라디라 미 녀버제바 있나야 쿤두라야디 용무요마다 저 된다라 랑기 임바체 이네 수수기 가사 수수 세나로라 잘라디 얘기 잘라디 인상베 상루디 말레베 거라 잘라디라 녀버제바 있나 디 용무요마 야 쿤두라야다 디수테디 용고마 배자샤바 이나 된라 수수기 카바 임바체 이나야 거두디 수수기 카바 임바 마시바체 수수 카바 인상바디 매바체 된라 수수 카바 임바체 이나야 거두디 수수 카바 인상베 상디 매바체 하나 미신다기 카바지 민주 상상순르지 수수 카바 레 상베 상루디 매베거라 미신다지 딜라 녀바체바이나 마수 센투야 용고면도와 디 가르 다된 거스나 다 심바 롱라야 的 디수 제디라 문두기 자신디라 랑기 임바 장데 마세 랑기 인 상베 상루 예방 다 상루 디 가서 그래 다 상디 예버스는 리도 다 딘데기 상루 예버지 고교레스 디 구베 다드레스 다 랑기 인 상베 상루 예버 있네 수수 예네야 수수기 다기워 딜라 신자기 매버이나 디 시부지 수수의 편도 예버다 이동어지 통에 딜라 신자지 매버이나 신자 매베 수수기 잘라디 미신다지 키베 있나야 마소 생기 나로라 디庆祝수 미기 총주수 미기 딜라 베제 가shum마지 땅도 상제지네 야 심바 마가오 요에디 용금이도
Now, when we talk about these two aspects Rinpoche mentioned earlier, so one of them Rinpoche mentioned it is mine, but it's not about just the fact that it belongs to oneself. It's not about that. It's about the thought that it belongs to oneself. So the thought, this is mine, this is my object. We need to have a mind that that takes, well, that we need to have an awareness, a consciousness that takes to mind that this is my object, and we need attachment, those two. Now, if those are not there, if, for instance, there's no thought, this is my object, this is it belongs to me, then unhappiness and anger can't arise. So without that kind of thought, this belongs to me, there's no anger, there's no worry, and so forth. To give you an example, let's say there's a particular mobile phone, and without knowing, it's actually your own phone, but without knowing that it belongs to you, if some other person, if we think, for instance, belongs to someone else, and if a third person comes along and breaks it, well, we won't really bother us. We won't really be concerned. But if there's the thought, this is mine, well, the situation is different. Therefore, it's important to have the thought, to at least have the thought, oh, this belongs to me. But if the other aspect, which is attachment, is missing, then despite the thought, this is mine, well, worry, etc., all these negative reactions won't arise. So it's based on the thought, oh, this is really beneficial, this is really beautiful. So on top of the thought, this belongs to me, attachment arises on the basis of the fact that this object, well, we like this object, we enjoy this object, and so forth. Now, if then that is complete and someone else comes along and misuses it, uses it in the wrong way, breaks it, scratches it, and so forth, well, that's the moment when we get worried, that's the moment when we get upset, and so forth. So therefore, those two minds, so it's not just the fact that you own it, but there needs to be the thought that this is mine, and there needs to be attachment for these negative reactions to arise.
다常常디 용구도 가서 그래. 디 샹디마 마시 세우 차그리 상고도 디수고의 양양슈에디 계진부 계진부 가수 임버디 하고 그래서 빼는 가수 들이다 땅 디상기 뒤죄라 다 배발라 차츠면 뭐이나 벤티로 파마다 빈자 뒤수 표현나도 이거지 양 낭기 낭미지 양은 디낭니 미지 다 슐로라 타른 것들이 자다 다 시제도가 디디고로 낭로라 파스 저어디 레라고 디 용기요 말어 다 상 주제 돈이 저 용디요 말도 간들 파스 내수 랑상랑사 고에디 녀마이나 루준이 쉬공래이나 디요 말어 단 잠불이 참마 지바로 루마 송주 시주 공라 파스 남미 빈제 카제네 타른 것들이 대여가 있는 핀생기 년수하고에 깔래가고 요러 제가 딘디가라 더 딘제기 내그 답지라 딘제기 내수디 디자인 요러 现在顶这个那个记了，变成俺做的家里的个你做去过瘾呢，几当多少去，变成家那了米去细下些说的去，别了米去细下些，顶这去过瘾，顶这记不起，但是顶这记不起过，是吧？第古的讲了，俺来年纪的米去新不来些，上地嘛是给那个么多，是吧？顶这记，第记不起过，谁不给我嘛米去种下些，他家那了米去细下，俺们那别了米去，顶这去的。他今年你们今年是过年，他俺别不记了下村哦的，家那了新年的，别了新年的，别了米些的米的，别不来下是都谁不起，第来带谁去是吧？别不记来下是，就过的讲了，哦的，叔叔当米里几百银不起，西西下上边，中下上边上对的讲了，带起草民着急来经过去做多，这些。但你们看些急了，哦，没重要的，特别难落了，那边呢，你弄不赢了，俺得派有几百银吧，你俺得弄不几百银吧，他啥些，是吧？群众去的，弄不几百银吧，的这个米去种下，故说呢，但地来讲，超级那个多，种下是没种下是一个种就米的几百几项是的，米几上去是吧？他的或者别人别雇佣的讲，他弄不几百银不去，种下谁去？但你怕前些几年，弄么几百人不去种下死了，就讲那你西你多是，俺这是那里山南路了，的，嗯，的超市了过来，刚才山南路了上端，但的水呢，叔叔南面的经验呢，没那些个，顶这个上路跨下的修清楚多，但的呢，你们看些急了哦，前两个南面的米几这些，前两个，你怕嘛并且就人下是了，就讲你西你。山南路了，还讲给他马几不来的，我作用不多。对了，中央的米的，既然热的，俺做山个南路当不贵的，既当个米去种下是雇佣我的。你什么你们的了？别把几了掐穿了，别把前面几了掐穿了，前面去种下噻。但你妈来的弄不几吧？今年妈来的叔叔哪个米是了用的讲，哪个米不新用的讲，那雇佣的讲了，那鼓多，马古那这个么的安全了，哪个米不是？雇佣还底下雇佣的讲了，你西呢？我做山南路了，草来当没着原来的谁不修差不多地图呢？
Now let's take another example. Well, let's say something happens. Oh no, first Rinpoche said something, sorry. So Rinpoche says, so this is important. This needs to be stressed again and again. It's important to talk about this again and again to really fully understand this. So let's take an example, the example of us Tibetans, for instance. Now, many of us Tibetans, well, we have relatives, we have parents who live in Tibet. And then we have other family members who live, for instance, in the West. Now, nowadays, with modern technology, there are ways to find out whether everyone is well or not. But in the past, let's say 30 or 40 years ago, well, you just knew that your relatives were in Tibet, they were in the West. But it was very difficult to know how they were doing. It was very difficult to find out their situation. So this kind of separation is still the same nowadays. We're still separated from many of our family members. And so whether you're whether it's in Tibet or it's in China, well, you hear, for instance, let's say you hear someone died in Tibet. So initially, when you hear that someone passed away, your first thought may be, oh, poor thing, the person passed away. Oh, that's too bad. You just heard someone died. There's not really, it happened in Tibet, but you don't know their nationality. And then you hear, well, it was a Tibetan who died. So your attitude slightly changes. So being a Tibetan, well, Rinpoche being a Tibetan himself, in that sense, because we share that share the nationality, ethnicity, or we have the same nationality, being Tibetan, the feeling changes. It's different from previously not knowing where they were from. And then let's say after a few days, then we hear that this person actually comes from the same region. So Rinpoche says, like, the region I come from in Tibet, it's just a small area. So let's say I'm informed that someone from that region has passed away, has died. The feeling gets stronger. The feeling that the concern about the death of this person, it grows stronger. It's the same person as before, but due to our relation or due to our connection to that person, the feeling has changed. And so worry arises. So the thought may arise, well, what happened? Could it be that it's someone from my family? Could it be a family member? And eventually then we find out, well, it was a parent, or it was a sibling who passed away. And again, our attitude is very different. We're really worried. We're really upset. Although it's the same person. In all these different cases, it was the same person. So first we hear it was just in general someone, no idea who they were from, no idea their nationality and so forth. Then then after some time we hear they're Tibetan. So already it changes. Then we hear they come from the same region. And eventually we hear their family member. Of course, we have to hear first that they are a family member. Unless we know that, our attitude doesn't change. But every time we get more information, our attitude changes. Every time our feeling changes. Although in all 4 cases, it was the same person.
다디 상례 나로라 난다 슈침불레야다 마지부 슈침불레야디 가드닝 구주기여버디 디토니 상다나 세부차 용구 다 가수 용구도와 간다라 지 모부티다 유디르 미베 신자 유여이나 로 신자디 가두 유여이너레 디네 송디 신자 유세기 유디이 체도 심바마지버 용야다 다 라수바 심바 추야라 수바다 라수바 라수 용야디 우딘데지니 주기여버디 아주 가사 다 디토네 고가 수 레트회지 디리샤 다디 시운디가라 다 된다 가르치고 왔어 어디가라 신자매나 심바마지보 용야매바 신자유에나 심바마지보 용디게바 심바지마지세디 신자유매기 토네 용디게바지 로 다디든 용구도
Therefore, when did our fear, our worry, our unhappiness, when did it start? Well, it becomes quite clear in this example when it actually started. Now, if we have attachment towards an object, if we cling to an object, then whenever something happens to the object, well, it disturbs our mind. We feel unhappy. We worry about it. But what does this mean altogether? What does this mean in conclusion? What kind of conclusion can we come to based on that? Well, if there is attachment, then there is unhappiness. If there's no attachment, there is no unhappiness. That's really what it comes down to.
다단다디 조우디 디스거다 르라 강연의 지중원에 디진 지진에 심바마지버 차야 디 간다 디 조우시고 말단다 아주 상로 동당게 토네 심바지부 용매 디 조우시고 서 간다 심바지마지 용야 디 对下的之后有个底线用过的，对下月呢，什么马基为用过的， 되샤 매나 심바마 지부 용야 요마리 가드이네 심바 지부지네 투레스 디 도도 디 동자네 디시 용거다 다디 레 말에 가서 따고 거라 상당고
Now, most important here is that we're not talking about having, for instance, physical problems. This is not about having a physical kind of reaction as opposed to a mental reaction. Here, it's mainly about a mental problem. Problems, difficulties arise in the mind, worry, unhappiness, and so forth. It all relates to the mind. Therefore, if we have attachment, we feel unhappiness. If we don't have attachment, we don't feel unhappy. So we can summarize this. We can very easily summon up this situation. With attachment, there's unhappiness. Without it, there is no unhappiness. This is something we need to think of. We need to think about.
다 가수 강라 된신이지 배시 세부 다 가수 그래 수고월 다 된신이지 강라 시어네 된신 당부디律动세디 저律动被 된다 가르에 세지 쉬인바律动세디 간대지 구구래 다 신자 뇌샤律动에 구구래스 디律动기 된다 디 된대지 구구도스 아니 된신이버디라 가르스 그래 나주 심바마지버 용에 된 국가디 주도스 심바마지버 용에 자워디 신자디니 유지를 미비 신자 레수나 유디 체도 심바마지버 용에 구주도스 디 디세 자네 간다 심바마지버 용에 자워 투서디 뇌샤로 투샤스 로 rimbaji yuan tieba ina da dini nga sugi da gangla xie di dunda dudu di xie war da
Therefore, previously we had two aspects to consider. Two aspects we need to reflect on, we need to understand, or that need to become clear to us. First is, what does it mean to let go? What is the meaning of letting go? It means to let go of our attachment. It means to let go of our clinging. Secondly, we need to understand what is the root of all our problems? What is the root of all our unhappiness? Well, what is that? What is the root of that? That is clinging. That is attachment. So these two aspects, it's important that we understand those two aspects. It all comes down to understanding those two in order then to be able to practice letting go.
我在主要谈的是刚才这两大段落。
다 나수 모티니 슈고에디 다 게시 마지버 심바 마지버 차야디 류다마 투바 유디를 신지 차바 딜 루디를 센디를 야르체 대조로 심바 유디를 수지지는 야르체네 디니 꼬마 투바딜 류다미 투바스 그래 상루디는 야르체네 수부디는 야요 말에 이나 심바딜은 야르체네 디네 수로 꼬마 투에딜 류다미 투바스 그래 신자 까마 투바스 그래 다 딘데디 유에바이나 심바마지버디 용그래 딘데디 이 매바이나 심바마지버 용구 말했을 때디 인가수 강을 시에바로 다 디시에디 강라 다 가수 가르산당 고르스나 다 심바지부스나 신자 까고 그래서 디시에 용거 아니 심바마지버디 무튜네 데네 디기여바이나 신자 마가나 디거래 다 딘데 임바 인디 다 가수 신자디 칸데스 까고 류동디 칸데스 제고레스 다 류동 제단디 제고라 신자 까단디 제고
Now, if we feel unhappy, if our mind is not happy because we're not able to let go, well, our mind, in that situation, our mind is attached to something. We're it's almost like our mind sticks to the object. It's kind of attached. It sticks to the object. It's not like that our body sticks to the object, but our mind sticks to it, and that causes unhappiness. And as mentioned earlier, if we didn't have the attachment, if our mind wasn't stuck to the object in the way just described, well, we wouldn't be unhappy. Now, that takes us to think, so that should cause us to think, well, we have to let go. That's the way to do it. If we don't want to be unhappy, well, there's no other way but to let go. Which leads us to the next step. What does it mean to let go? So after having understood that we have to let go in order not to feel unhappy, we then need to understand the process of letting go, or how to let go.
다 디 라구게는 간다 신자 유여베이나 마지버 용구 유여베티제 다 딜러 미비 신자 간에 메베이나 다 신제다 마지버 게리고 말아 신제다 마지버 말레버 쿠란랑 디마르베 디워 띵아소도 구바디 말해 신제양가 기 리메버시 마지버 기 리메버시 심벌 흘려지 데디 다 심벌 띵부지시니 시와다 바페버시 흘려지 데디 생기 디지스나 조다 딘렌다부지기 투니 용구요로 다디 신자 매베 투니 용구오레 디숭고르 다디 인디간라 다 심벌 마지버 용에디 까발라 신자디 가고 그랬다. 律动起来，说律动过来，上路村的律动也起过来，他的刚才起过来，说的这的，但举行几多年，举行几上当些呢，律动，切土月吧，切古月吧，等这切过了嘛，都大是干过了，老不长期平的嘛，都干多嘛了。
So as mentioned before, if we have attachment, we feel unhappy. If there's no attachment, we won't. That means if there's no attachment, we won't feel any worry, we won't be unhappy, we won't get upset and so forth. So in other words, isn't that happiness? I mean, the absence of worry, of concern, of feeling upset and so forth. Isn't that really what we're looking for? Like this absence of all these negative states, that is happiness. That's a stable kind of mind. It's a calm mind. It's a satisfied kind of mind. So it really comes about that kind of peaceful, that kind of calm and satisfied mind comes about from the absence of attachment. Which is why we have to now let go through our mind. Our mind has to let go. We have to let go of a particular type of mind. We have to change our thoughts. And in order to be able to do that, we first, of course, need to reflect, can we actually do that? Are we able to let go in such a way? And is it worth it? Is it worth doing it? Those are aspects we need to reflect on. We need to analyze. Otherwise, we won't be able to let go of our attachment. It won't happen on its own. We won't be able to automatically, or the attachment will not automatically just disappear. Instead, we have to give these questions some thought. Can we do it? Is it worth it?
律当国呀是了为那的了米比新下的怕嘎国呀当的怕没不输国呀就先开始了的律当嘛托其实呢身体了新的差呢的国呀民族是的国吧叔叔了国呀没被加拉起来下是开始了的第一这个新下的叔叔了拼图没不长的嘛是让了 체당 푸니가라 뇌베랑신지 디 쿠나리샤스다 뇌버 쿠나 요버마도 핀바가야미도 다야 쇼신다시네 가르송고르스로 디간라 신자 매바이나 나츠상로 나로로 신자 매나 디와 간데스 용그레스 딜레 신자 마제는 디와 간데 용그레스 거로 뭐에네 줄을 때레 제민도 신자 매바이나 신자 유여발레 하비 디와 지용엔도 디와 디와 투도 신자 매바이나 신이 디와도 뎀바 용투도 마도 신자 유여나 디와도 뎀바 자원 용투민도现在딘데 인상 신자디 까고 그래스 디송교다 다디 디 뭐에네 줄을 디 인바디 시고로 신자디 수수라 녀버 체분니가를 뇌베랑신지 쿠나인바 디시고다 디매나 수수라 뇌베 디와타토고 용교여버디 시고다 디마시는 리금도
Well, again, what we need to do is to let go. That is to let go of our attachment. Attachment is something we don't need. Not just that, not only is it useless, on top of that, it actually harms us. It harms us in the short term and it harms us in the long term. And all it does, it only harms us. It doesn't have any benefit. On top of that, well, if we don't have, if we may wonder, well, without attachment, will we really find happiness, or how will we find happiness? Well, actually, we will find a happiness that is so much greater than we've known so far. So this is what is explained. Right now, we don't have any real happiness. Without attachment, we can't experience any real type of happiness. But if we are able to overcome our attachment, we can finally experience that. And these are the facts we need to know. It's important to understand these facts. How our happiness, our feeling unhappy, short-term and long-term, how all this, our unhappiness, our long-term, short-term and long-term unhappiness has all been caused by our attachment. And that without attachment, we can experience short and long-term happiness. This is something we really need to understand, because without understanding this, well, letting go won't happen automatically. It won't happen on its own.
第一个呢是所谓的贪，它带给我们的唯有伤害而已。第二个是只有没有了贪，我们才可能获得真正的快乐。知道事实是非常重要的。
다 토마딜라 가서 수술을 되어지 당고 나중에 가르치네 신자지고레스 디티오디다 다 디오디 렌디 디로 나중에 상나로 나중디 코디고레 신자 제외이나 라니라 디시 제바 라소베 다 평송 소바 로 제바의 파바지 용그레스 디 용액이 된다라 아니 신자지디 요레스 신자지 유스 다디 상규어나 주상나보다 다디 상규어디 삼바나신 외내 주레베스 더 저디워
Now, first, we have to ask ourselves something. Why do we have attachment? Why are we attached to things? Well, the answer to that is that there's a sense if we're not attached, we won't find happiness. Because of there's a sense that because of our attachment, well, this attachment will help us to find happiness. It greatly benefits us. So that's what attachment does. The sense we have that attachment benefits us in this way. But we need to ask ourselves, is that really true?
랑로 구버디 제기요레베 야나 수수기 내가 호다바다치 베센치 포종치 tindel라 때네 아니 수수라 디제 핀송수가 연구요레스 데디로
So asking ourselves, does this align with reality? Is that in accordance with reality? So does attachment really give us happiness? Again, we need to ask ourselves, does attachment really bring us happiness and satisfaction? Or working hard, making an effort, studying, does that bring us satisfaction?
당다. 디인디간라 수수라 문예기 디워 때르켄다 가서 그래. 된다 뭐마디 루야디 가르기 지고르스나 자어디 지고르마도 뇌샤기 상루디 지기메 바스. 빼나 두고 자야디 칼라 사야디 지기도마도 칼라를 차바디 두고 자고 말어.
So again, therefore, we need to ask ourselves, what really gives us happiness? It's that activity, for instance, studying, working hard, and so forth, that brings happiness, but it's not attachment. For instance, our attachment to food doesn't fill our stomach. It's eating the food. Eating the food fills our stomach, brings us satisfaction. It's not our attachment to the food.
뇌차 미고버지 뇌차 고야메가 디제 빈소소가 용하라 디제 빈소소가 용해 디체도 깔래잖니 자오 중해야디 내가 제조로 디 용규여버디 디톤에 가르치 세부 차기도
And that way, what becomes clear is that for us to find real happiness, there's no need for attachment. Attachment won't bring us lasting happiness, won't help us to find real happiness. Instead, what helps us to find that kind of happiness is to work hard, to make an effort. That can really lead to the result of real happiness.
뇌차면은 내가 후다바다 지기를 왜했어 로 신 뇌차 위에서 내가 후다바다 지기를 마도 뇌차면은 내가 후다바다 지기 말어 왔어 디 상징 아주 레기로 하다 레나
不过讲到这里啊，大家可能会想啊，
Another thought that we may have is that, well, without attachment, we won't be able to work hard. We won't be able to make an effort. So that thought may arise.
따디 말했어 가레스 어디간라 뇌차 매바 있나야 뇌차라 만덴버 로 미디 두비 체도 레가 후다 체당 로중 후다 체디 다 모이네 술디 용구기 어디 용투그레스 디 용구어레스 가레스 어디간라 자와디 자와스네 미디 체도 자와 좀바이나 수수라 체다 푸니가라 핀도도 민도 체라 핀도면요 부장신 무토네 핀도도 민도 딘데 따지지네 핀도 유업을 통유로 핀도 유업을 통유다 니번이스라고 그래요. 다 간데 핀도 유업이 땡땡인 것이 통수는 시력이 따지지네 디 니번이스는 시력이 토네 아니 자어디 부다바다 시야당 미디 줘야기 치도 내가 중요하디 연구요레스 디 나서 수수기 냥냥 돈이 되게 용되게 그랬어.
But that's actually not true. Because, well, it's not necessary. We don't need attachment. We don't need to rely on attachment to fulfill our goals. So working hard, studying, and so forth, it just makes sense. I mean, we don't need attachment in order to work hard, etc., and work hard, study, and so forth. All we need to do is, well, use wisdom to understand or to reflect whether working hard, studying, and all that, I mean, all the other activities whether they benefit us in the short or long term. If they don't benefit us in the short term, well, at the very least, do they benefit us in the long term? So it's this wisdom, it's this intelligence. If we apply that, then through analysis, we come to the conclusion that working hard is necessary, studying is necessary. And based on that conclusion, we will actually feel we will actually study hard, we will actually work hard and so forth. So we don't need attachment to do so. And this is something we can come to understand based on our own experience.
다디 되샤라 만덴바 시러기 제버체네 딘제기 방랑체디로 디치고도 시지네 후다바다체 디제네 롱음도 시지네 파 깔레제네 뽕야 디 되샤라 만덴바 시러기 투네 용투유여버디 세버리 베나 나조 맹강라 양양的大节期间主要当你가서课节了 되샤 다课节的要修的事情뒤了 차바지에的别个来考了뭐但이내 가서是8岁的 가서 낭주 시를 비지 당시 오 당가 민강은 만주나 부러 강에 침부지 되게 민강은 양양 주는 가 부러 강에 되게 말했어 아니 다나신课节呢 몽발라 나선 공부치 두고를 시지네 딘데기 가서 시를 강라 강산지 비제 땅에 누에긴 되버면이야 후다바다 생아서 누구 계기도 딘 누구 당가서로 디리 다양 수신다지를 찾은 거 있나 배는 가서 친하고 창장로서 로 셰터서 알아통서 딘데는 누에 디라 가서 뭐에네 줄 친하고 셰터서 누구 그룹이 창통산 누구 그룹에서나 저 디 고바게 말어 디 수술에 편 친구 여바다 디 친이 수술을 러준 친구 요한 텐데스게요 말어 이내 가서 되베 신왕도 주네 딜라 딘드웰은 되베 요인자 되자기 신왕도 주네 판주기 어로 이나 창상 가서 상단에 디 되베 레베이나 어디 야부면도 디 제는 수술 뉴기도 상비톤 되베 바카트에 디에 연구도 어디 시력이 강라 강상 제버진이 연구 어디 상마
Now, when it comes to attachment, well, in order to really find happiness, we don't need attachment. We need wisdom. Wisdom is that which protects us. It's very clear that that is what helps us to find the incentive to work hard, to study, and so forth. To give you another example, well, we may go to hospital to get an infection, to get an not an infection, to get an injection. So it's not that we are attached to injections. I mean, it's hard to believe that someone feels attached to injections and therefore goes to hospital to receive them there. But instead, we apply intelligence, we apply wisdom that understands, well, if we get this injection, that may protect us from future problems. It may help us, like in the case of vaccinations, it may help us to avoid certain diseases in the future. So it helps us to avoid problems and have less difficulties in the future. So we don't need attachment for that. We go to hospital and do all this without attachment. On the other hand, at night, for instance, if we feel like, oh, I want to go out now, I want to go dance and drink and go wild, for instance, well, it's not that this greatly benefits us. It's not like that we get a specific, so our studies go well because of that, be going better, or we get something great out of it. It's really just this short-term pleasure that we go for. So that is out of attachment. But of course, on the other hand, we may be able to reflect on that. Is this when this wish arises to kind of go wild at night? Well, is it really worth it? We may reflect on that and apply wisdom that enables us to make a decision based on that wisdom.
接着수술了구장 전부 투네 핀도 가르유메 다지 치네 아니 다 풀了지 가서 우리 난가 풀了핀도 유바 딘데지 찔러지 당가 만으로 제조로 디 당야지 디 제구도선 디 제지 딘데디 다 시력이 투네 다 간다 핀에 가려면 따제지니 시력이 따제지니 자원 디더 딜러 슈야 당 샤오 디더 딜러 아니 가서 우리 미슈야디 용 시력 투니 용도도 세상 디인디가라 되차 매나 소중 후다보다 제디 용그룹에 내가 후다보다 제디 용그룹에서나 디 용그룹에서 뒤로 디 용토그룹에서 디 용그룹에서 디지 다 디장도 마스 다디 가서 디전세 지제 다 딘데 이나 되차디 딜미비 되차 가야당 간데디 류동세디 로 딜미비 되차 류동 되차파 가야디 공도 쉬바나시 가당디 상동에 림버딘데 지지 다 디투네 되차 가고에디 가르스나 되차디 뉴번 마시마도 핀도 지요 말스고로 수수로 뉴번 마시마도 핀도 지에미도 쓰고디 다디 간데스레스를 디간라 공도 쉬바나시 되차를 때네 심마지보 용해디 다 강라 강산지 세브레 상도 디전시 지리 디지 강라 강산지 하고지 디토네 다 단동 아주 시고지디 되차 이날에 뇽모비 루칸데지 이날에 다 비제 나로 뇽모비 루시 송거다 간데 되차당 가수르다 공주당 다나신기 차도당 다나신기 낭이당 고바당 로 나제제로서 딘제기 루 디주 상 딘제기 루기 지디 뭐에네 수지마지신 통네 고 용요 말에 디 간데스 용거스 디간라 수수기 낭수디 실샤니 수수기 나와 실샤니 수수기 간덴다부지 통교 옛날에 디 실샤니 지용 랑긴 되바 실샤 랑긴 나와디 나와디 딘데지 통송스 가레스는 옌딘데 통송세시 계제 파티나 되차다 콘두다 디수제딜 계제 문에 디선다부 유나 디선다부 유엔스라고래 계제 스티워이나 그 렌디 타마 가르자 그랬으나 러시안 딜은 되자 제고에 가르스나 그 야부시부 도스그래 야분 도스는 간데스 야부 돌러디 야분 도베 지생 키슐러디 네 야부 통송스그래 다 마마 시는 네 통송세들 그래서 수수기 나와디 실러샤니 지고리스 디인디 나와 실러샤니 지디간라 무에네 수 실러샤니 루투기요 말 가디에는 무에네 수도 장게치 차고리 되차 루기 신왕도 주네 내가 제윤디 타만타마디 둥에 지운 그래 타만타마디 무에네 수도 미팅바 차니 강에 침비 티그리 무에네 수도 다 린도 그래서 무에네 수도 다 린도 루디간라 신지루기 가서 그래 다 무에네 수다 미팅비 신지루기 네수 네당 지了2000년 루고로 타마디 타타딜 강에 제마도 연구 말이스 그래서 디 되샤기 수수로 뉴기가 들어와 디수 통고도 디 통바이나 아니 간데스가 고기면 하고
Therefore, it's important to consider what brings us long-term happiness, what brings us a long-term benefit. That needs to be analyzed. And in the short term, we may have to work hard. We have to make the right kind of decision. So with regard to what really brings us benefit, what really benefits us in the future. So all this is based on wisdom. There's no need for attachment. Without attachment, we can nonetheless work hard, we can study well, we can make anything possible. On top of that, well, it's important to let go of attachment. We have to let go we have to apply this mind that mentally lets go. Because attachment only harms us. There is no benefit as such of attachment. It only brings problems. So Rinpoche talked about this before. It's important to understand how it harms us. So no matter whether it's attachment or any other afflicted mind, whether it's anger, whether it's envy, arrogance, spite, all these different afflicted types of minds, well, they do not align with reality. They're not in accordance with reality with regard to how they perceive their objects. They're just based on personal appearances. They're based on what we want and what we don't want. So why do we have attachment? Why do we have anger? Why do we get attached? Why do we get angry? If someone asks us that, the answer is, well, because we thought it was good or because we thought it was bad. And if we ask again, well, why did you think so? Well, because that's how I perceived it. That's how it appears to me or how it appeared to me. So it's like a personal kind of a personal way in which we see things that is not based on reality. Um, our afflictions arise because we see things in a way that does not accord with reality. In fact, our afflictions bring about the opposite of what we wish for, which is unhappiness. It just leads to unhappiness. We are in opposition the moment we have attachment or any other afflictions, we are in opposition to reality. We move further away from reality. And all that we experience as a result are problems. This is what we need to understand. We need to see how these afflictions cause us so many problems and then know how to stop them. We need to find out, we need to learn or develop the understanding of how we can stop the afflictions.
다 세상 유딜미빈 되샤 가야딜라 당부딜라 되샤 코랑기 가솔라 가른 유규비 수디 공도 쉬버나시 디수상치다 说다 림번니버딜라 나츠 되샤 지세기 위주어로 신자 지세기 위주어로 유디 내당디 상당네 되샤 지가 다 림번니 투니 다 되자 루크랑게 가솔라 가른 유규비 강라지 다 쉬자인 봐 디리 다 조조 디디리단 되샤세디 수수기 나와실라 샤니 지용고레스 데디 베닝가치 뭐요다 랑기 나와실라 샤니 되샤지 요레스라 둥웨니 수실라 샤니 지용마레스 랑기 나와세디 랑기 통수디리 랑기 통수디 간데스데 요레스라 디강라 다 비제 나로라다 수수기 바샤 인증문에 샤베 바샤당 디수 제디기 주치 아니 수수기 뇌바 뒤중기 수수기 뇌쇼당 가쇼 수수기 가부지에 쇼당 뇌바지에 쇼당 메가이 쇼당 민데비 쇼세 바마기 쇼세 뒤중이 수수기 상류기 시가지오로 오 유친 디술의 때네 아니 낭수디 내용 거래 수수기 뇌바당 수수기 생기 응안의 샤베 바샤당 아니 단대기 뇌쇼 뇌바 디니기 토네 랑기 낭 통수디 나와디 수수 통해야 거래 무부지라 미니기 따디간도 통수리 민다리리고로 그래서 통수디 뭐에네 주 뭐에네 주 임바 천투고 말해 세상 통수디 실어샤네 뇌자지기레세 딜라 나서 가서 양양 상당고 그러다 그래서 디인디 뇌자기 수술을 가수 뇌버지 유버디 뭐에네 주도 튼베 토는 루투기메버디 지상당 나딘 뇌자 코랑이 뇌들이다 단 되샤 가야라 되샤 지세기 유디 라 상단에 되샤 가야지 다 유디를 미니 되샤 가야디 송용디가라 다 디송용고도 되샤 지세기 유디 나중에 나중에 간된다고 통고르스나 다바 템버 순리지 뒤다도 띵부 유디 베순리지 통 아니 디토네 가 수술을 뒤다도 펜베랑 신지 차 탄제니 이동어 따부지 통. 다 뒤다도 수수 핀투 여버스는데 근데지 통에 뇌자지 연구로 세상 외에 출은 뇌자지색 위디 가르스라 디가나 위디 메템베랑시레스 메다베랑시레스
Mm.
이 통에 뇌자지색 위디 메템버 장的마세 위디 수수라 강에 난수 장인고요 위디를 때문에 강에 난수 용 가서 그래 용디기 요버지 용기 요버지 레스 다 간다 강에 난수 템버치 제킨지 레스 마세 위디라 롱제네 랑기 센大的我吧是，他别的最大的提升设计，最大的提不用具吧，这是这边是呢，有的农间呢，我吧没别上心，这是是，아니, 차 탄제니 이동 이렇게 말해 시지니 유디 내수 지마지신데 우주 전에 뇌자 가야 돼. 가르스는 뇌자기 차 탄제니 이동지 통에 뇌자지 연구래. 뭐에 내수라 차 탄제니 이동 많이 버지 우주 전에 디시수나 뭐에 내수라 차 탄제니 이동 많이 버지 시수나 차 탄제니 이동 통에 뇌자지에 우랑신 켄. 로 어디서
We generate attachment on the basis of a particular object. And in that context, there are two steps, basically. Well, first, one step is to understand how does this harm us, to understand the process of how it actually leads us to, brings problems and difficulties and so forth. And the next step is to understand how the object really exists, the object that we attach to. It's important to understand how it exists in reality. And Rinpoche said, I already talked about how it harms us, how the object or how our attachment to the object harms us. But what's also important is to understand that our attachment arises on the basis of appearances, on the basis of how things appear to us, of how we see the world. On the basis of that, we generate attachment. So the Buddhist texts, for instance, the scriptures, they talk about imprints that we accumulated in the past. So based on these imprints and based on what we want, what we don't want, or whether we don't care, based on that, these imprints ripen. So because of the imprints, there are different appearances, there's what we actually wish for ourselves, all that comes together. And due to our different imprints, for instance, well, we have all different appearances, or things appear to us differently. It's all very subjective. But none of these are in accordance with reality. In order to overcome attachment, we actually also have to overcome the object. Now, when we say the object, this refers to how the object appears to us, how we perceive the object. We believe the object to be permanent, to be stable. There's also a sense that it will always benefit us, that it's incredibly great, I mean, we exaggerate the positive qualities of these objects. We see this as great from all sides, basically, and we have a sense that it really benefits us. So based on that, attachment arises because of our wrong view. But in reality, the object is not stable. It is impermanent. It constantly changes. And our attachment to it leads to endless problems. It induces all sorts of problems and difficulties. And it doesn't satisfy us for a long time. So in the long term, we won't find satisfaction based on that object. So the object is unable to bring us or to result in the kind of benefit we're expecting from it or we believe it to have. it's not from all sides positive. It's not like it's 100% positive. It's not like it's just positive. So if we understand that it has all these negative aspects as well, that our perception of it is wrong, then we're able to let go of attachment. So these are all aspects we need to consider: how attachment harms us, how the object is perceived in the wrong way, and so forth. So based on that, we can then finally let go of attachment.
但뇌작이 유디 차 탄젠이 이동을 통교를 디 디양 가서 그래 간대질 쓰고래 디 다다지 고 따체의 뎀버스라고 그래 디 고디양 야부지만이 버이나 이 군호태니 거요 나도 상상了나 딜러 미빈 되샤유디 쿠기 쥐양에 나니 통교스 쥐양 통교도디 쿨러 미빈 되샤 지기도 시지니 디 사운드 레싱으로 디 유딜러 미빈 되샤유나 유딜러 쥐 자원에 통고 말했어 시진 딜러유요 말해로 딜러유요 말해 다 되샤 코랑지 디강나리다 유딜러 미빈 되샤 지용디 강라 되샤기 뭐라 유디의 신지차별 루디기 신자기 루디기 유디기 리베 차쿠나 통화마도 밀리베 차자니 kuy 통고 말해 뇌차기 루디 유디기 리베 차 연den기 차 이동의 차 디쿠나 통화마도 밀리베 차 강에 통고 말해 kuy 원래 밀리베 차디 용토고요 말다 차 탄지 이동어세디 된대지라는 고린 주도
So we say that attachment perceives its object in a completely positive way. It's unable to see negativities. But when we talk about not having the right kind of measure when it comes to seeing its positive or negative qualities, that is easily misunderstood. Sometimes people say, yeah, well, I do see its faults. I understand that this object that I'm attached to has faults, and still I'm attached to it. So this means, well, we're not saying, first of all, that there's not another mind different from the attachment that doesn't see the faults of the object. That's not what is meant with what Rinpoche said earlier. Instead, what we mean is that from the perspective of the attachment itself, from its perspective, it sees its object, it perceives its object only in a positive way. Nothing negative can appear to it.
집에 가도라 뇌작이 롱원라 뇌작이 상루죠로 디잉원라 디 뇌작이 유디 통용디 간라 유디 연된 코나 통야마도 쥐기 차 통고 말했어 뇌작이 루디 그 쇼지마도 쇼시 사모 통통이디 말했어 단 뇌작
So he would
쇼 탄제 통통이기 루지 말했어 쇼지마도 잔 통고 말했어 그렇고
So here we're talking about attachment itself. It's not saying that another mind can't perceive the faults of a particular object. No, we're saying attachment, it's from the perspective of just attachment itself. So in other words, what attachment perceives is just the positive aspect. Nothing else can appear to it. It cannot see the object for what it actually is. It's only obsessed with the positive, or it's only perceiving, it's only apprehending the positive aspects. So the Chinese translator asked, but you said earlier that we can see the faults. So, but then Ginla says from the perspective of the attachment, it only sees positive qualities. But then again, you said that faults are seen. Just what?
말했어. 다 레디 뒤준도 뇌자 지석이 위디라 뒤준도 상당한 데가라 pen amagi 수수 부글 니 부글 쥐다 유쥐 뒤 시지네 amagi 부글 쥐 요버디 시기워로 시기워디 부글 신자요로 다 신자 집에 갔던 뇌자 집에 가도디라 뇌자기 롱올라 뇌자기 루디기 이런 뇌자기 루디 에 뇌자라니기 유 디기 연den기 차마도 자 밀리비 차디 통구 말했스 디스코다
So here we're saying, so the Chinese translator asked, like, well, you said you do see the fold, and then you say the attachment doesn't see the fold. So Ginla said, well, for instance, a mother, in general, she knows that her child has faults, has shortcomings, and so forth. But when attachment arises, then that attachment can no longer see these faults. So in other words, another mind can see these faults, but the moment there's attachment, then that attachment is unable to see the object for what it is. From the perspective of that attachment, the object is faultless. The child, in this case, is the child. So in the case of the child, in the case of attachment, when the mother perceives the child at the time when there's attachment, she's unable to perceive the faults. Or from the perspective of the attachment, faults are just not a reality of that object. The attachment sees the object as 100% or totally, completely positive.
가인스는 뇌자 집에 가도디라 미신다지 부글 유비 외내 주기 전지 죄바 있나야 마가오 용구도 딩올리 제마퇴 이 유에네야 요르스지 러니 마조 용구도 러마퇴 치카니 올리 제마퇴
因为呢，在升起贪心的那个时候，那么
Why? Well, how do we know that? Because when there's attachment and someone points out the faults of that child, well, the mother is unwilling or unable to admit that there are faults. Because of the attachment in that moment, she's not able to talk about her child's faults.
先生다 유디 뇌자 지세기 유기 랑신디 무죄지네 메템베 랑신바 동에 나수 다 동에 랑신바 라고르다 동에 나수 장용킹기 딘데기 랑신바 아니 모범메베 다 롱죄네 모범메베 다니친바 다디 무죄지네 유디르미베 신자가야진도 단도 디 강라 유디르미베 신자가야기 따터 서슈디 메다 동에 동 다메 시지네 간다 뇌자가야기 터 서슈디 다메버티 송용구도 하다 다 진지기도
Now, when we reflect on the actual nature of the object of attachment, well, first of all, it's not stable. It is impermanent. Secondly, it's in the nature of suffering. In other words, it causes the experience of a lot of problems, and it doesn't exist by way of its own entity. Now, in order to overcome attachment, what we need to understand, the kind of the most effective way to overcome attachment is to understand its actual nature, that it doesn't exist by way of its own nature, that it doesn't have a kind of self, a kind of a self that exists in and of itself.
다 세지 가수 세나로라 nga 세기 다 nga 오냐비 루지요로 nga 세 루지요 다 루디기 유 nga 세디 풍비 씨라 야나 nga 오냐비 루지세기 시디 풍부레 루지에기 시 신다고디 풍비지고래 루지에기 시 풍비지요르디 풍비띵도 nga 가반도 스타디 nga yo 말해 nga 메디가라 풍비띵도 nga 풍부 그다 수지 풍부들에베 초의 풍부 초 가서 되어 등에 초래죠 디레베 야나 넘버 10 디레베 두제지 풍부 싫어 다 낭주기 싫어서 딘데 디레베 딘데 로 다지 제디가라 디주 간에 차고 말해 간 nga chago mare nga se di mare di je di nga se di je na nie me be da ni nie yo mare pumbi kin du yo mare ta je da me bare da me ba cha di gang la pumbu zang de la man lu ba ta pumbu zang re ro nga yo mare se long di gang ta pumbu zang de se ba ro da pumbu se di sha yi pumbu dan di su di pumbu zang de se ba 다 풍부장도 세버를 어디가라 취장 취장근 도시스거다 풍부장 풍부로 취스거라 가서 강사도 취스 어디가 풍부로 취스거라 다가는 풍부장도 세버 다 뒤제도 치랑기 풍부디에 풍부래 니 풍부디에 풍부래 치랑기 샤디야 샤레 니 샤디에 샤레 에 잠블리기 미탄제기 수부기 샤디에 샤레 니 수부기 샤디에 샤레 다 샤지버지장래 루버지버지장래 차 차차인 뭐 집어지장래 아니 초디 초인 뭐 집어지장래 다 샤인 뭐 집어지장 루버인 뭐 집어지장 지라 아니 파기딜라 강에 체디가는 가서를 선택 강에 많이 뭐지 수수기 샤당 품부 가서 품분딜라 강에 체디가는 가서 마집을 연구해 용의 민도가 쓰고 다 용의 시구나 민도 쓰고 디 세부 차선 로 다 나세디 요 말에시 러윤디가라 아니 풍부장도 세버리스다 여버디 풍부장 세스는지로 다 가는 풍부장리스다 대형 몸이 돈이 풍부장리스 나세디 제니니에 요 말이스 나세기 타니다스 가서 그래 타니다 나오냐베 류 파다베 다여기 취장제마도 대형 몸마다 풍부장도 세버리스 풍부장을 미네 나다버리스 풍부장레스 딜러윤디가라 체랑기 풍부 예 풍부 퀴 풍부 아니 강사 단계기 풍부장으로 와다 풍부디야 중앙 시기 나노를 파구샤 제와이나 사기다니 아니 추기다니 미기다니 롱기다니 드레차디고라 다 참사로 체랑기 사 예사 퀴사 세스는 아니 쿠기살라 강에 체수는 아주 스마 나로를 가야 마치고 용고 말 수수사간라 수 가서 풍비 뒤에 사기 칸라 강에 체디간라 신제 용함이 용고에 그러면도 집어라 사파기 디간로 슈바이나야레 수수기 풍비 뒤에 살라 슈바이나야레 사기 칸라 슈바이나 주바 슈바이나 그 살라 슈바 장레마도 살라 슈바 장 집어라 세상 랑기 살라 슈송 시진이 풍부의 슈송 시진이 마가와 시당지 외기 시 주체민도 쓰고 디 세부차에는 매나 나 진짜 좀 시작이다.
Now, when we talk about a mind that thinks I, an awareness, a consciousness that thinks I, what is the basis for such a mind? It is the aggregates. So besides the aggregates, or on top of the aggregates, there is no self that can be found. So what are the aggregates? There's the physical aggregate, the body, there's feeling, pleasant feeling and unpleasant feeling, or neutral feeling. Then there is the primary consciousness, there is discernment, and so forth. So in that way, there's no self that can be found separate from these aggregates. And that's what we mean when we say there's no self. When we talk about selflessness, there is no self in the way it appears to us. So what's actually there is only the aggregates. Only the aggregates are there. So it's just a phenomenon. So of person versus phenomenon, it's just a phenomenon that's there. So there's my aggregates. There's my flesh, my bones, there's my skin, my blood, and so forth. But in that way, we're all the same, because there's also another person's flesh and bones and blood and so forth. There's the other person's feelings. There's the other person's aggregates. But how come, if we're exactly the same in that there's really just aggregates, psychophysical complex. I mean, just the aggregates, the physical and mental aggregates. If the other person has a problems, we don't really care. There's no feeling. But when ourselves, when we personally have a problem, then we become unhappy. But there's really no reasons for that reaction, because in the end, we're all the same, just aggregates. There's just this imputed phenomenon. That's all there is. So our self, for instance, the person, the I, is merely labeled on the basis of the aggregates. So really what's there are the aggregates, and all people are exactly the same. They're only aggregates. Aggregates that are made of, for instance, the 4 elements. There's the earth element, the fire element, the water element, and so forth, and so forth. Now, when it comes to the earth element, let's say someone hits us with a stick, or someone hits another person with a stick. Well, what happens is the stick hits the earth element of this physical aggregate, the physical aggregate of that person. When that happens, there's no problem. There's no worry, that it doesn't bother us. So why do we feel unhappy when it happens to us? When in the end, all that happens is the stick hits the earth element of another person, or the stick hits the element of our own body. But in both cases, it's just an earth element that gets hit, or it's just the body that gets hit. Therefore, there's just no reason to get unhappy.
停止这边给
No, 那这样没得的。
找不着。我问人们也说是
나랑
这样吗？可是他说有点
So Rinpoche understands Chinese, and the Chinese translator asked, "Is this okay?" And Rinpoche said, "It's kind of similar." So the Chinese translator laughs.
라발로 쇼송 시시네 롱랑도 마도 라발로 쇼 시시네 롱랑도 라발로 쇼송 시시네 라발로 쇼버디 주센티 제네 롱랑교에나 차랑기 라발로 쇼버디 쇼네 롱랑고래 쿠이 라발로 쇼네 롱랑고래 세자 찔러랑 마랑버디 체버 가른 두고도스나 네 라바 세디 나이 라발로 쇼상 세디 나이 라발로 쇼송 세기 상루 디토네 롱랑도 세자 나이 라발로 쇼시 세기 상루 디토네 롱랑교 인디가라 나 세디 무에네술라 요마레스 나 세디 제베 다 반주르 주거 바데네 심바이나 주주야 요마레스다 나 세기 상바나신기 상주기 나디 가와두스나 류다장레마도 다베지무장레마도 全党不全我们土呢要嘛的意思，碰不脏的意思，碰不脏的谁的意思？我第四个。
So Rinpoche says, actually, if someone hits my arm, for instance, usually the thought that arises is not an arm was hit. So it's not like we have the thought an arm was hit and therefore we get unhappy. Instead, there's the thought my arm was hit. So the emphasis is on the arm that belongs to me, that was hit. And on that basis, we get upset. If we just had the thought, oh, an arm was hit, if that was the basis for our getting upset, then every time any arm is hit, we should get upset. But of course, that doesn't happen. So it's really based on this sense of that there's an I which owns the arm, and if that's hit, we get upset. However, that I cannot be found. That I is merely labeled on the basis of the aggregates, which is why, again, if there's no owner of the arm that can be found, then it doesn't make sense to get upset based on the thought, my arm was hit. Because in the actuality, there's just an arm got hit, which is very impressive. It's just impersonal.
学生，어디 가르송 연구에서나 네 자기도 풍부장의 세버 통용의 풍부장의 세버에서도 다 풍부장을 거다 풍부장의 세버에서도 디간라 나세디 도도 딘데지게 요 말했어. 다 풍부 다 조디 넘버 10이 풍부도 류지 풍부리 뒷장린도 넘버 10이 류지 풍부. 다 쿠란기 넘버 10이 풍부 류지 풍부 니 류지 풍부 넘버 10이 풍부 세기 넘버 10이 풍부 다 풍부장 쓰다 타니디 다디부도 어디 공대 이리가라. 풍부장래 세디지. 다 풍부장 인바 인디가라 풍부장라 녀바지디가라 지바지장에서 그 풍부를 녀바지에 있는 풍부장로 녀바지를 니 풍부를 녀바지디가 나라 녀바지디가나야 그 나라 녀바지디가나 그 풍부장로 녀바지버리 니 나라의 녀바지디가나 니 풍부장로 녀바지버리 도디는 풍부장로 녀바지버리 지바지장에서 그래서 군인이를 지了 당원 미제了지了당원 지고 봐 지체도 선제지了지체도 선제 미제비 제버디 민도 시지네 디지 송용고로 다 디송용디 간라 전용음의 톤에 갈 송용고도 쓰나 다 전다 음의 톤에 간데스 두고를 쓰려디 간라 간더 강의 용약이 주진지 상부이나 강의 용약이 그 춘이리스 강의 용약이 주진디 만상부이나 강의 명용어디 춘이리스 춘이디 되나야 춘이래 민되나야 춘이래 디라 디제케요 말스 용구도 시진이 가부 가서 그래 세례 개요 가부지에다 용구민도 시진이 세례 개요 신제지에스 개요 말스 디고 랑신 말스 다 랑신 말스 시진이 송용디 간라 뺏는 뒤로와 나라서 수수기 풍부를 찾선바이나 풍부라 강의 용약이 주진진 종소는 풍비된의 강의 용거리 뒤춘이래서 그렇다. 야부 용약이 주진지 소소는 풍비된의 야부지 용거리 뒤춘이래서 그렇다. 다 춘이 인바 인디강라 지장기다. 다 계시 풍비된의 강의 두야디 나주 강의디 파 두야지 제바 있나 가르치고 쓰러디가나 뒤기 주진 가출시 파 두두두 주 가출시 두두두 진 가출시 두두두 시지네 간들 무에네 출라 강에디 용약이 주 가출시 방토나 제부 디장지 봉토그래 주 가출시 가수그래 빠마토베이는 제부양 디다 창버지 용그레스티 춘이기랑 신레 시지네 송용구도
Therefore, when we think of ourselves, all there is are aggregates. So the mere aggregates. There is no actual concrete I, the way it appears to us. That kind of I cannot be found. So they're just these aggregates, the mere aggregates. This is a very convenient way of saying it, the mere aggregates, the mere mind and body. That's all there is. And if they are harmed, well, if another person's aggregates are harmed, or my aggregates are harmed, actually there's no difference. It's just some aggregates that are receiving the harm, that are receiving they're being hit, or whatever other harm is inflicted on them. So there's no need to be concerned just with my own aggregates and feel indifferent towards the aggregates of another person. And why do problems arise, for instance? Why is pain inflicted on some aggregates or not? Well, because the causes and conditions for that to happen were complete or incomplete. So this is just the nature of things, that if there are the causes and conditions for a particular problem to arise, well, the problem will occur. If they're not complete, the problem will not occur. So there's no need for this extreme worry and the obsession with ourselves and our aggregates. This is just the nature of things. If there are certain positive causes and conditions, well, the result will be positive. And understanding that, and in the negative case, or in contrast to that, like negative causes and conditions are accumulated, there's a negative result. Well, if we really understand that, then all we need to do is accumulate the right kind of causes and conditions. So we need to work on We need to work on, the more we can work on that, the more we can determine, or we can make sure that positive causes and conditions occur versus negative ones. So this is just the nature of things, that it's all dependent on causes and conditions. This is just the nature of phenomenon, the nature of suffering and so forth.
对啊，理解过的。풍부장도 세버레스 라버다. 풍부장도 세버레스. 풍부장도 세버레스 어디 간다? 풍부를 녀버지네 롱랑 말이. 풍부를 녀버지 세지 롱랑이 수주요 말이. 또 풍부다 배나 풍부장도 세버레스는 딜러는 저기도다. 배나 수지 풍부디 남배雄的写当写为呢康熙大年间康大年间사주민로 낭신 낭게 강스제진으로 강주기 다니진 디장로다 야면은 수지 풍부디 강시 다니진 되는지로 다 풍부장의 세버리 수지 풍부장의 세버리 사이 강장의 세버리 추이 강장의 세버리 슬디간라 사이 강의 슈스제진의 로낭이 요르베 요마레 다 세디제는 요마레 풍부장의 세버리스 다 풍부의 슈스시 로낭이 요마르다 现在，瀑布的牛八戒呢，弄来没不哩？瀑布的牛八戒事情呢，弄来没不哩？你瀑布的也不平个都事情呢，对下几也有嘛嘞？现在瀑布长的设备通用的讲了，恰当几也西藏么看住多，恰当藏么几也没不去顺住多，的设备恰算，的大的这里呢用瀑布长的设备的，是啷的讲了？ 国新大去看那个都是瀑布长的设备呢的，瀑布的偏托那样留下机会的，瀑布的软件呢，控制浪怪界面的，但控制浪啥可能要嘛的，瀑布的偏托设计呢，控制浪留下经验要嘛的，瀑布的软设计呢，控制浪也要嘛的，但控制干的是浪个人，留下干的是我是呢，俺了偏托送，俺了女的都是。 네 지지지를 뉴기도 네 지지지를 핑기도 스탄 도드는 나래도 나 나라 핑기도 나라 뉴기도 시티 단나 세기 루티파 가서 그래 나 원향비 루티파 까바이나 로 나 원향비 루티 나 세디 다장래 전에 풍부장래 시지네 풍부장이 뭐 니버니 소나 다 풍부를 쇼네 쇼 풍부를 쇼송 그래 杀了修松，去了修松，谁基本的？杀了偏松，去了偏松，谁的？他第几句？你对下让新的节没有去抢这个多，修今年第几节？牛木节没有去抢这个多，第几节？他修现代的国际，他碰不涨赢不赢呢？啊你，他看出来，我说碰不涨的谁不赢呢？帮浪干的结果的，是帮浪过了，几浪几帮。 偏土的浪，你不有不的偏土的出浪，你不有不的怕崩死去呢？帮浪给什么写过了？你看这写过的是了的，俺地区忙着没着。
Now, thinking that there's only aggregates, well, there's nothing we should get angry about. There's no reason to get angry. In actuality, when we talk about our aggregates, they consist of, or they are made of the 6 constituents. So the 4 elements plus space plus consciousness. So these are the 6 constituents. Or if we just talk about the physical aggregate, well, it's made of the 4 elements and space. So what is it really we get angry with? Are we getting angry with space? If there's no I, there's no need to get angry. If someone benefits of our aggregates, there's no need to feel attached, to have attachment for that person or for that benefit, or to be attached to that benefit. In the sense that therefore the I, when we say we get angry or we have attachment, it always comes down, it comes back to the I, because the aggregates themselves, that's totally impersonal. So it always comes back to the I or the self. But if there's no self, then there's really just the elements. It comes down to these constituents. But then the question that may arise is that if there are only aggregates, if all there is the physical and the mental aggregate, well, how do we actually avoid that which is to be avoided and adopt that which is to be adopted? So that is the next question. If there's no I, how can we actually effectively practice this, the avoidance of what needs to be avoided and and adopting what needs to be adopted? Anyway, Rinpoche said he explains that in the next time he talks, because otherwise it gets too long, he said.
接下去这次
다
听到
뒤로
你对，然后
다
要
뒤로
没
나오냐 빌루스에 뒤로 풍불라 왕주 킹킹아 나지 디 뱀부다부치 나디 나 제부다부치 나수 여바 딘센디고 딘데기로 제부다비기 나지 요마서 다디 파가 야면은 나세디 풍비 나라지 나지 파지 뭐가치나 된 담배 나지 된주 여바나시 닌디 마르다스 된 근데 요 말 나세디 또베 따상게 리무리스다 밀랑기 수다 주봉자다고 딘데지 일러는 만지고 맹인듯이
So when we think when the thought I arises, well, there's often the sense, or when we grasp at the self, there's often the sense that there's an I that is in charge, that is in control, like the person or the thing in charge of the five aggregates. But there is no such self. It's impossible. The self is merely labeled on the basis of the five aggregates. Such a controller, such a thing that is in charge of the five aggregates simply doesn't exist.
다가서 풍불라 뇌베 다니 디수테디 더 빵구로로 풍불라 닌가 친구지 레 임바이나 디 닌가 친구디 마용에게 응고치고로 다디 간데스 제국을 쓴다 다길래 들이 세상 닌가디 용약이 주진나주 예외나니 주진 가수시 빵토베이나 닌가디 충족그래 주진 차상 빵토는 닌가 차상 매우 차그래 주진 니뉴지 매우 수도베이나 아니 닌가 니뉴지 매우 수도그래 디 춘익이랑 신이래서 다디 춘익이랑 다 춘익은 원리 제고래서 다디 뭐에네 수디 원 뭐에네 수디 되나들이 민되나디 인디가라 뭐에네 수 춘이 도드메버 딘데지 인기니 다 도드메버 랑신딜라 도드 여버지 차고기였으나 도에 맹이딜 도에 여버지 차고였으나 디 용에메 바로 디스거다.
Now, of course, when someone harms our aggregates, we need to stop that harm, or we need to prevent such harm from occurring. But as Rinpoche explained earlier, well, the way to do this is to avoid or to avoid or to overcome the causes and conditions that gave rise to that harm. So if possible, we reduce them. Well, if possible, we totally eliminate any harm. And if that's not possible, we reduce it to the best of our ability. That's a reality. That's a realistic approach. This is this is just the nature of things. It's in accordance with reality, whether we accept it or not. But just because we don't accept it, it doesn't mean we can change it. I mean, we can't change the nature of things. If it's a certain way, there's nothing we can do about it, even if we don't believe this to be the case.
도에 매버디 도에 여버지 차고였으나 용에메.
如果不能怎么讲，不能遮除的，你硬要说它能遮除，那这样也就是不符合事实。对不对？
那写上第送用的讲了，가르쳐하게 두스나 수술을 강연 친구지 체 임바이나 수부로 강에 침부지 체인 뭐이나 다 강에 침부지 체레샤 신제 제외이나 신제디 핀도요 말이스 다디 되는고도 신제지나 년출은 좋은 주에를 핀도게요 말이스 엔다나시 오나 년출은 좋은 주에 가르치고 있으나 좋은 주에기 년출디 용약이 주진 가르인 버이나 주진기 돈이 상당히 주진의 방랑치는 제불은 좋아 당고 그래 디장래 디장만도 터요 말이스 디되는고
那么，这样说下来，我们会得到一个怎样的结论呢？就是如果今天在我们的身体上面，遇到了很大的困难，这时候你要明白，如果我因为这样而担心的话，你要明白这个担心是没有用的。那么，我要做什么才会有用呢？就是对不起，这个担心是没有用的，它对于改变事实是没有帮助的。那么，对于改变事实有帮助的事情是什么呢？就是你要去理解这些困难它产生的因缘是什么，想办法在这些因缘上面做出正确的取舍，则我们想要改变的这些事实，它才有办法改变，就只是这样而已。
那现在，冬季节为呢，搞的菜锅是呢，别的俺做到底人多，虚日就我不，适当多当适度的着，大拿些个虚日个我不，叔叔的卡通这个给买的个，叔叔个地了大等什么也给要嘛的，军事大不，地主这地了，地了新家也给买吧，是吧？ 수수의 카툰 제어 매딩이 슈르지 사단 도 윤시 라수바 수수딜라 신자야 매바 수수디 다든 셈바야 매바 딩아인 삼비 루엔요 말에 딜라 신자야 간요 말 다 딘데지라 전종디 간라 딘데지라 디수제디라 가서 월다 卷种不是了，这个没着。他地主这地了，变得军系打不起了，军系地刚不刚出来了，说吧当军系地了不接了，说吧的顶这一，年初开始准备呢，俺说三南路了，马几不吃鸡要嘛了，到底呢，叔叔的新家面色的我不记了，开始准备呢，俺说三百马几不吃鸡要嘛了，但电影这个。 叔叔的书不定啊，叔叔的新家面色的我不定当星期了怕，是吧？定当星期怕，卡说的，大多不赢呢，许就我不提出了新家面长，工作了，捐卡的用不赢了的，大拿星期，咱们西部顺着看得起，但咱们西部是老古呗，看到，顶这个，米粒被掐卡的种的呀，啊说。 간요 마 심바 간야 마지바 간야 차고 말 간야 차고 다 디나 수수 수부의 신자매가 제시하나 수부라 가리 용구여에 있는 나사 가리 용구여에 있는 짜면 시바 가리 용구여에 있는 디 용구도 세진의 신제 제고의 신제 용구의 민도 아니 신제 용양 거라 민도 수수 수부의 신자매가 제나 그러 다 수부라 랑기 류다 랑기 센의 신자유의 디시투 수부라 지지지지 강에 용거리다 닌가 지지지지 도다 실러 용디가 아니베 시부지 뭐 가서 그래 신제 용대지 용구도 안 가서 세상 디마요에 디 수수 수부야 수수 신자매비 시루지 오부 낭신지를 봤대네 신자매비 오부지를 봐 주토가 있나 수부를 강에 요면 심마지버 용구 말에 수부를 강에 용버디 간데스 두고 그랬으나 오다 다기 러버 나시 준제기 주당디 상단 강에 디 용약이 주진가 주 방도나 뽕양기 터시제 디장리 딜레로스 강에 마지 심벌려지니 내디는 야슈리스 어디 때디 고어딘데지레 용구도
My apologies. My Wi-Fi stopped working, so I had to connect my phone. So I missed some part of what Rinpoche just said. Rinpoche talked about, well, the fact that whether it's earth or whether it's the soil, whether it's stones, whatever, actually, when someone harms these objects, there's no special feeling. Like, for instance, a tree, when insects eat a tree or anything else happens to it, there's no sense someone harms me. Why? Because there's no attachment. There's no attachment to the object. There's no relation between the tree and the sense of I. But in the case of the aggregates, that's when we connect it to an I that is merely labeled, and we exaggerate it's the way it actually exists, which then leads to unhappiness. Therefore, it's important to see our body in the same way as we see other objects, other external objects around us, that we feel indifferent towards, in the sense that we don't worry about when something happens to them. So this unhappiness doesn't make sense. It's important that we don't fall into despair when something happens to our body. So this attachment to the body, there's no point basically in all this worry that it brings about. If there's attachment, then we have problems, we have worry, we feel unhappy, we are upset, and so forth. However, it's so important to change that attitude, just that unhappiness. It doesn't mean we shouldn't look after our body. It doesn't mean when something or someone harms our body, we shouldn't do something about it. But in this case, it's about looking at the causes and conditions to analyze what causes this problem, what causes this harm, and avoid these causes and conditions. That's all we can do. There's no need at the same time to get upset, to get unhappy and worry, etc. Instead, we should stay relaxed. We should go and sleep. We should relax and rest and take a nap. If we've worked towards the causes and conditions, the necessary causes and conditions to remove or avoid a particular problem.
다 근데 상당히가 디차고도 변는 것도 다 구슈스의 지버지장지 니유이나 니가 주주 가수였는 저기도다 구슈 지버지장지로 지버지장지 차단지 내려도 루 아니 지마 카두 이 상마 지버인 거지 상마 지버 nga ju 가수였는 자탄바 가수였는 다 디나 디 지버지장 임버지라 지를 강에 용디 신대시 신다를 강에 용디 신대 맞이나 디 구버에 가래다디 디 구버에서라 그러 디라 지라 아니 전중딩 가서 신대시 신다를 용디 신대 맞이나 디레미도 가서 그래 양다버지 말아와디 양은 상말을 강에 술을 강에 중내야 신대시에 그래 야미나 상말을 중디가라 신대시에 오고 간스나 상마 집어지장래 카도 집어를 이 집어를 루 집어를 주마 집어를 이러와 된대지라 셰장 공부장도 세버레스로 어디순데 차인 거다
So if you reflect on this, let's say, for instance, you have 2 apples, or more than 2 apples, maybe 5 or 10. You have like a whole bunch of different apples with the same color, the same shape, the same smell, and the same taste. So they all look alike. Now, if one of them, well, to put it the way Rinpoche put it, has a problem, or if something happens to one of them, why would you be unhappy if you're not unhappy when something happens, something negative happens to the other apples? They all look the same. So either if something happens to one apple, to any of the apples, I should be concerned equally or should not be concerned at all. But to pick out one apple and be concerned when something negative happens to it, but not to be concerned with all the other apples, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. So they're all the same in terms of color, shape, taste, and smell. Therefore, my reaction should be the same with regard to each and every one of them.
第三档呢，是第三档呢，先了俺这的新家，看啥，新不马基巴的长嘛，嘎呀个头是几多，但的律动设的，他讲的预定了没被新家嘎图数呢？预定了，预定律动不是个人马多。预定越没去为短大马的，预定别些当没去为短大马的，预定别些当我涨了捐要马的，预定越不涨了捐给要马的，别下越不涨了捐给要马的，的捐的是个马的，说的别下的伊那呀别下的了，搭档车的买回呢，你捐用过的是，但第送过多少呢？
Therefore, if you think in that way, then there's no longer any way in which the mind becomes unhappy. So this is what letting go is all about. This kind of attachment, to let go of this kind of attachment. That doesn't mean we don't care for our body. We don't care for the objects we have. We don't look after it. So with the case of money, for instance, it doesn't mean that we cannot utilize it. It's not about not using things, not enjoying things and so forth, or not taking care of things. It's instead letting go of our attachment for them. That's what is meant with letting go here.
但的律动出的什么基因的图呢？什么嘛基本个什么最大的基本水头是基因但的嘛因吧，俺说短时你不的，但今年不当冬天谈起的话了出绝是了呢，今年的话了绝呀，今年不的除了出绝过的，俺说上年去呢，但对最重要的。
So this is the first topic that Rinpoche wanted to talk about. This is the first step about letting go, or how to let go. And then the second topic, or the second step, would be to take adverse conditions, take problems, difficulties, and so forth, and transform them into the path, transform them into something that benefits us. Because So Rinpoche said, this is enough for today. We will leave it at that, and Rinpoche will talk about everything else tomorrow. But Rinpoche said, did you say that you transform it in such a way that it becomes a cause for happiness?
So let's
do the dedication prayer.
다기 지니 사베 기원데 된다로 공나감베다 제바 지진 로산 자와이 때문에 님부린도 세시 쇼 강자의 고유 신간 소변다 대와 만는 중에 신의